Welcome. We're live. Woohoo! Woo-hoo! Yes. So today we are talking about Pixar shorts, and really on a grander scale, we are talking about short story writing. And I'm just going to go ahead and say it because none of y'all were likely backstage with us before the show. So here's the part I didn't get to say. I don't know why so many writers are afraid of short story writing or think it doesn't apply to them. Even if you're not into short story writing, learning how to short story write will only help your writing. It will not hurt you at all, I promise. It is a very useful skill to have because, as they say, brevity is the soul of wit. But also, like, what you learn in short story writing directly translates to novel writing. It's just everything sort of compact. So again, it's sort of like Twitter versus a real conversation. Yes, a lot of people, how do I say this? Butcher their tweets. They don't try. They don't sculpt. And so they sound like idiots. But for those who are trying to hone their writing craft, writing tweets makes you have to really think about what is the essence of what I am trying to say in this moment. And again, you will notice your writing will improve. So again, anytime you're practicing with constraints, it can only help you in your writing craft and also in your communication in general. And so here we are today, highly controversial. And to help me be controversial are these fantastic people. There's Tom and Charlie. Woot, 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 woot. And of course, I think the Chaos Demon is somewhere in the background of Charlie's mic.
Who knows? He's filling in holes with cement today. So yeah. I think the one major advantage that you missed that a lot of writers need to be thinking about is in this world of short content being really popular, such as like Instagram Reels, YouTube Shorts, and TikTok. I'm trying to hone my own skills writing drabbles because that's about the length of a short when you read it out loud. That's they read in about a minute. And guess what? Now I have content for channels.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of reasons to use this, but
yes, the hill Maggie will die on.
Well, that's just because the whole Dragon Riders of Pern thing started as a short story. I get it.
As I said, like, I wasn't really into short stories as a child. My mother was the one who, again, like, frankly, there's no way for me to talk about my writing without talking about my primary teacher, which was my mother. My mother was the one who told me when I was 8 that when I was 4, she realized I was going to be a writer. And when I was 8, she told me this. I said, I don't think you're right. And she said, why? And I said, because I still can't read. I was faking it. And she knew I was faking it in school because I'm dyslexic and our schools were crappy. And many of my schools said that you can't be dyslexic and be a girl. I'm serious. And so offered absolutely no support for me as a dyslexic girl. And my mother knew that. My mother had already gone through the education program herself, though. And so she's like, you will eventually learn to read. Your father is so dyslexic, and he did eventually learn to read too. You will eventually, your brain will catch up, and you will learn to read. And once you learn to read, you will write. But you were already telling us stories. Oh my gosh, did I tell so many stories? So she's like, so I'm still going to teach you how to be a writer so that, you can finally share your stories, your thoughts with other people. And I'm like, can't I just do it by saying? She's like, it's hard to get them to gather around in big groups and listen. People don't listen very well, but reading, they can reread it later when they're ready to pay attention. And that was her original push. So again, my mother was like, you need to practice writing short stories before you write long stories, because it will help you practice the same skills, but you'll do it faster. You can get the results much faster. And so she had me practicing writing short essays before writing long essays, and writing very short stories. Like, seriously, can you tell me a story in 1 to 3 sentences? And like, it would take me all day to think of like how to do this in 3 sentences or less. But like at dinner time, I was expected to share with your family. And I think that that was a wonderful exercise, and I'm so glad that she was supportive of me doing that. And really, no matter how many excuses I came up with when I was a child and a teenager, she was always like, "Yes, but let's keep trying. Yes, sure, absolutely, I hear you. Absolutely, yes. But you want to write long stories? Absolutely. But in the meantime, let's do this." And so that is why I am also here going, "Yes, I know you love to word vomit, but also let's talk about it."
And I know this will come as a shock to anyone who's ever read anything that I've written, but I'm a huge fan of pulp sci-fi and fantasy from like the 20s, 30s, and 40s. And one of the things that I've always wanted to be able to do is build these elaborate worlds through shorter fiction, because that to me is kind of the magic of that period, is that they were able to build these expansive settings using such little bits of story to do it, from Robert E. Howard to the infamous H.P. Lovecraft, who is so ubiquitous today that you can't really escape him if you go anywhere near fans of horror. And that was all through these short stories that sometimes would even retell the same story over again from a different point of view.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see how he was able to make this universe that he was writing in feel so expansive, because you felt like you were looking in these little windows at little parts of it. So it's kind of, in my mind, always been a way to hack that sense of scope, in that if you tell a little story over here and a little story over there, and there's the sense that these definitely exist in the same world, you're like, but wow, what all is happening in between?
Yeah,
It makes the
we
world
like how
actually feel
Spence,
clear.
how Spence put it, of short stories are fun because of how they use the negative space. Like what they leave unsaid. You have to fill it in. And HP definitely did that a lot.
Yeah.
And to a lesser degree, Howard did as well.
Mm-hmm.
Of your imagination will have to fill in these other details.
And when you look at how even large IPs today, like The Witcher, started in these magazines when he first started writing them as very short pieces, which is why the first 2 books that you get are just collections of those stories. And
I still remember the first time I ever heard The Witcher was around the time the very first game, I think, might have been coming out, or maybe it was just the first novelization. And it was in a webcomic. I thought they were making it all up. I thought this was just the most insane bit of fantasy fandom anyone could imagine. I didn't realize they were talking about a real IP. It just didn't even seem real.
And that's the brilliance of how those stories came about, and why we need to embrace our weirdness, which is a lot easier to do in short fiction, because he had written a lot of other stuff, but his son didn't like it. And so he asked his kid, what could I write that you would actually read? And he was like, I don't know, like fairy tales, but really epic. And he was like, okay. And thus The Witcher was born. And if you read through those initial stories, there's Snow White and the Seven Dwarves, their Cinderella, their Beauty and the Beast. You can see, especially in the original stories, my personal favorite is when you get to The Little Mermaid. His version of The Little Mermaid, I absolutely love and need a film version of. But yeah, it's easier to take those risks when you know I only need to get 1,000, 2,000, 5,000 words out of this, as opposed to, especially if you're doing science fiction and fantasy, with these books, thanks Brandon, getting gigantic where you feel almost obligated to write 200, 300, 400,000 words.
My only consolation is he has gotten so much feedback on this that he even references that he knows they're way too long in his class, his coursework that he posted on YouTube, of like, good. I'm glad that you feel put upon, because I feel put upon when I'm like expected to read tomes just to get a fantasy story.
But it's hard to do the experimentation that you need to do to get something fun and fresh in a fantasy setting, because so much has been done because the genre is so popular. But when you have a short story to work with, you can take all the risks that you want because you can get from start to finish really quickly.
Also, with a short story, and you can be as short as you want to, as you said, down to a drabble, and you can just skip to the good parts. With a short story, it's expected that you won't have much of the like walking to Mordor part, and it will just be the Shire and then Mordor. Okay.
No helicopter shots in New Zealand, dang it.
And you can just skip to all the good bits and the part that you actually want to write. Whatever the part is, maybe the part you want to write is just the dialogue. Or maybe the part you want to write is just the fighting scenes. And with a short story, you can mostly just do that. And people are not expecting, the full 20-course meal. They're expecting a snack. And
how many courses is Maggie's?
Oh,
that's a dim sum banquet.
1.3
sit at the table all day as the trains go by.
Fun. That is.
And I will say, she doesn't actually have much filler in her stories. She just has that much filler. It's, she wrote out her own version of Babylon 5.
Yeah.
In a Sword and Planet. Like, it's...
Yeah, that checks.
It's 5 years of story.
Yeah. But, like, again, so one of the other things that is wonderful about short stories is it is a wonderful way to give a sample to readers to see if they want more of what you have. So you can give them just a snack. Here, I have a little, this is it. It's just a snack. If you like it, I have bigger meals here.
So I see CB, and we also heard before behind screens of Maggie, and just there's a lot of people who do not feel like they can do short stories well. And I'm going to just bring up this same point through all of these Pixar shorts. So let me just lay this out to begin with so y'all can anticipate me, what I'm about to say. Here is how Pixar shorts work. And they can work for you. They work for everyone. That's why Pixar does it this way. Is it doesn't require originality the way most people think you have to be original. And that is, take any situation out there. Take any concept. Write it in the center of your page and now brainstorm. Like let's go with that first one. We're going to talk about Luxo Jr. We're going to talk about parent and child. That's the center concept is parent and child. And now brainstorm every thought you associate with parent and child. You associate playtime, you associate misunderstandings, you associate surprise, unique toys, trying to teach, just brainstorm all the different things you think when you think parent and child.
Trying to feed little food fussers.
Oh, God, yes.
Yeah.
Thank God for the airplane.
Oh, God. I was going to say, the airplane and the choo-choo train. Open up for the choo-choo.
I know.
Oh, my God. Thank goodness for the choo-choo and the airplane.
And then we're going to use the human brain and the way it has evolved. If you are human, this is how your brain works. So just trust it. And that is, all human brains, the way we remember anything is we create a story. And so look at all these words and phrases you have written down with this main concept, and just figure out the story that connects each of these. Because you're just writing little short pieces. You're not doing a long arc. We're just trying to connect all of these thoughts into one long train route.
Mm-hmm.
And there is your short story.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. It's not, we're not having to rethink the emotional arc. We're not having to rethink the character growth. It's a short story. There is no real character growth. There is character discovery. We discover their personalities through the actions and what happens in the story. We don't really see them grow because it's just a short piece. But that is how Pixar shorts function. And then when we've got all of these little elements, we're then going to make a pastiche of pick the scenario. So Luxo Jr. is parent and child with office furniture. That's Luxo Jr. And now it's unique. Now it is something completely different we haven't seen before, because we have not seen office furniture as both parent and child. It's not co-workers, it's parent and child.
It's a big lamp and a baby lamp.
And so your attention is wrapped because what's going to happen next? Because you as the audience are figuring out, what is this situation? You're being clued in by what happens. But you keep figuring out, and so they don't also beleaguer any point. They just go from point to point to point. Once they have established one concept, they just go immediately to the next. We don't have to stick around. We don't have to make sure all the edges are filled in with details. Tell me the origin of the rug in the corner that's hanging on the wall, and what war it is related to, and how that person barely came back alive, but not really, because they died soon after. It's a short story. It don't matter.
I think also with shorts, you don't have to over-explain. Many neurodivergent people feel a obligation or a lot of social pressure to over-explain themselves to neurotypicals, and then eventually we just over-explain to everybody. And with short stories, you're somewhat freed from the obligation to over-explain everything to make sure that you are understood correctly. With short stories, there is enough that that the reader is already expecting to fill in for themselves, that you could just write it the way you want to read it or what you meant, and not worry about, but will a general audience understand? Don't worry. Because by the very nature of a short story, it's not going to be overfilled with explanations because it's short. They just need to understand the broad strokes. Literally, you're painting the side of a barn. All right, that's probably not the right use of literally, but...
Well, I also feel like, and this may just be from my experience doing music stuff, that they're actually playing off of a simple trope in how to write lyrics for a song, and it's called the shy method. And shy stands for simile, how, and why. So you start with a simile where maybe you are my brain just completely lost all song lyrics. So you start with a metaphor, like, what if parents are like these office furniture? How are they like that? And then why? And you repeat this over and over again. If you actually pay attention to most of your favorite songs, almost all of them present this way.
Mm-hmm.
So, Creep is a very famous example of a song that uses this method for songwriting, where you start off with just this simile. This is like this. Well, how is this like this? And then why is this? Why? And through a lot of the Pixar shorts, especially, as Lonely as a Cloud, like, through a lot of the Pixar shorts, you can see them sitting back going, I want to tell a story about this emotion. We're happy, we're in love, we're You know, when I think of like Lava, which is one of my favorite Pixar shorts, right? How do I tell a story about love and isolation? So love is like two islands, right? You can see them going to this like islands in the stream, right? Like it's like two islands. Well, how do they get together? Well, oh, a lot of islands are volcanoes. So love, being in love is like a volcanic island. Dot 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 dot. Right? You can see how they went into the simile first for the emotion that they're wanting to capture. And then how is this like this? Keep answering that through the story, and why is it like that? And then coming out with a story at the end. It's a very Pixar does this very lyrical thing when they're putting their stories together that really, it's why it hits you in the emotions so hard. Because, and I know we're going to talk about a lot of these later, but like Bao, you don't have to sit back and go, why do I have feelings about this cute little dumpling? That dumpling is your creative output, whether that's the story that you made, the song that you recorded, your own child, whatever it is. Like you can see that simile, that metaphor very strongly in the relationship with that dumpling. And you can see how that's explained in the story, and then why you feel like this explained in the story. 3 simple beats. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the Pixar shorts follow those 3 simple beats. Mm-hmm. And even if you're not writing a song or a poem, it's a really good way to write a short story or a drabble, to just hit those 3 beats and hit them hard. And then you have a compelling story. It may need polishing, but you have a compelling story.
Yes.
Sorry.
Nope.
I mean, I like that essentially we've between the two of us, we've given people 2 very different ways to look at each of these and see which is easier for them to conceptualize, work with. Because like one of the things I also feel that when people are learning to write and tell stories, that is not discussed enough. I think of it as like it's the mental version of when you're going through the education program. They teach you how to literally draw on a whiteboard, chalkboard, pick however old you are. And they go over like, okay, how are you going to do this? Because this requires a certain type of hand-eye coordination that even as adults, we don't necessarily all have. So what are the tricks to them? And like one of the tricks I love is, how do you draw a straight line? And it works with your proprioception of like how you can always touch your nose unless you have brain damage. And that is, you take any point on your body and then you just move another point to it. And your body will always move in a direct line. It knows where each part is. So you just put one finger down on the chalkboard or the whiteboard, and you just put the other hand on the chalkboard and you draw a line to it. And it will always go straight. And your brain is the same way with concepts. It will always try to draw a straight line from one concept to the next. It doesn't really like to meander much. Unless, you know, the muse hits or the ADHD hits. But for the most part, as long as you have a concept to go to, your brain will just go, how do I connect this to that? And if we can just give it short steps, we will just do direct little steps without issue. It's when we have very divergent, different ideas that it's hard to go from one to the next. We have to start making interlinking thoughts. But if you can just make these little ones, it's a lot easier to write a short story. And then once you see how that works, it's easier to write longer stories. But yeah, you first have to work out that muscle. You know, you have to be that baby doing your power squats at the
coffee table.
At the coffee table or the couch.
Mm-hmm.
Working those thigh muscles till you can stand and walk on your own. But first, you got to do the squats.
You got to do the squats. Got to get those glutes in action, right? Get your little baby calves going. But so the first 3 or 4 that I thought we would talk about are essentially Luxor Jr., Jerry's Game for the Birds, and Bounden. And these are, now you may ask, hello, Heather, hello, Jenna. Yes, the perfect investigative X-ray is about ripping your hearts apart. It's true. It's true. You're right. I guess that's one of the things that I kind of like about the early stuff. Early shorts was not necessarily about ripping you to shreds. By the way, there is a very okay. Number one, can I just say real quick rant about Disney Plus and the year they're putting on these shorts and how egregiously wrong they are. Tom thinks it's the first year that each of these shorts was put on DVD. And I'm like, the young people. No, versus I would like to, first off, hey Gary, just point out that the first time I ever saw Luxo Jr. was our mother worked at the National Center for Physical Acoustics at Ole Miss. And so much taxpayer money paid for this building. And they had this amazing theater in there that was meant to show off to high-ranking military the research that they had. But of course, since it had just opened actually at that point in 91, 92?
Yeah, 91.
Well, I'm just thinking of when we actually saw the video. Since they had just established the building and opened it up, they had nothing to show except how great the projection is. And because the Mac had won the contract, so all the computers in the entire building were Macs, including the projection room was just filled with, did Mac, anyway.
Yeah, they had servers.
Yeah,
all the servers and everything. So because essentially this, the federal government had paid so much for this building and for all these Mac computers, Mac was like, hey, we'll give you this little short, Luxo Jr., to show the military, then the Pentagon higher-ups, how great the equipment is. Generals were not impressed. They were like, who cares? We want the research. And they're like, well, that's going to take a while. Because, they were studying the sex life of bubbles and stuff. For reals, they were actually studying the sex life of bubbles. Did you know bubbles are promiscuous? They apparently are. And when you're like, Glory, was this really federal money? Yes, this was actually military spending. And this, literally, you could see the beginning research of this in the movie The Hunt for Red October. Because they're following the bubbles to follow the submarines. So anyway, that's actually the research that was being done at the National Center for Physical Acoustics. And they were making anyway, that's a whole nother thing. I'm tangent. So anyway, so then the director who my mother worked for felt embarrassed. He did not stay long, by the way. And he felt embarrassed. So he said, you know what? We will have all the scientists and the other staff, including the custodians and their families. Everybody's family can come and we're going to fill this theater and everybody can watch this Mac short film. And that is when I first saw Luxo Jr. We all showed up 8 o'clock at night or 7 o'clock at night on a Tuesday night or something to watch less than 10 minutes of a video. And everybody agreed, yes, the seats are very comfy. And yes, the projection is very nice. And also, can we watch E.T. on this thing? Does it play VHS? The answer is yes, it does. And no, he would not let us watch movies on it. Because several of the families were like, oh, that would be cool. Could we do that once a month? Watch a movie, for the families of the NAACP? The National Center, let's see, what is
NCPA.
it? NCPA for the NCPA employees. And that director was like, no, absolutely not. And guess what? He did not even last a year. Because there was no prestige in it for him. But anyhow, so that is my memory of watching it in a theater, even though I don't know that it was shown in a movie theater like for the general public for a very long time. But it was like the coolest dang thing at the time we'd ever seen, because it was so close, like it was so photorealistic for the times. For the late 80s, early 90s, y'all, it was like, for the young people, let me tell you, it looked great. Okay. We didn't think it was actually photorealistic. Like, it wasn't like stop action, like we could tell, but it did look great. So, but what happened in between Luxo Jr. and Jerry's Game and For the Birds? I had to look it up. And the answer is, throughout the 90s, Pixar made a heck ton of commercials. And that's why there's really not any shorts that they came out with for the most part, other than commercials for, like, I don't know, was it pickup trucks and stuff? I wasn't paying attention. It's on Wikipedia. Yes, people lost their minds for Pixar in the 90s. And so they did commercials. They did Super Bowl ads, right?
Yeah.
I remember, like, everybody's like, did you see the Super Bowl ad? It was so amazing. My father would watch the Super Bowl for the commercials in the 90s. And so, again, just to, like, that was, like, why there's this gap. Even though Luxo Jr. was actually this really cool thing. I think, actually, what they came out with soon after, though, was Knick Knack, which is now listed as coming out in the 2000, like, again, Disney Plus. Stop letting the interns run things. The young people.
Yeah, Ed Catmull, in his wonderful book Creativity Inc., spends a lot of great book. Goes through a lot of the history of early Pixar, from literally its development as, can we make lightsabers with this inside of Lucasfilm, all the way through to the creation of Toy Story and beyond. And if you are interested in how Pixar writes stories and how they do creative stuff, great book, highly recommend. But yeah, the thing that the kind of unsung hero of all of this is, this technology had to be built from the ground up. And so they were trying all of these things on easy commissions of, can you make a frog do this? Can you do this dog food commercial?
Weren't they involved in the original Budweiser frog commercial? You know,
I believe so.
I remember it wasn't that a Super Bowl ad originally, because I remember everybody in Oxford, Mississippi, talking about the Budweiser frogs for months. Literally, like, that would, a whole diner would do that at once.
Yep. Oh god!
Spontaneously. Do you remember how weird that was? It was so weird.
So yeah, the 90s were stranger than anyone gives them credit for being. But, and that, I don't think Toy Story could have happened. Like, when we're talking about the utility of short stories, Toy Story itself could not have happened if it wasn't for, one, them figuring out how to make Luxo Jr. happen, but this trial and error process that they went through with both the shorts and the original pitch for Toy Story, when they decided to, hey, why don't we try making a movie? They made a short. It's terrifying and trash.
Like, wasn't it, like Tom was mentioning earlier today, was Woody as a tyrant?
Yeah, Woody's the villain.
Yes.
Woody's very much the villain, and that did not change until Tom Hanks was cast to play him.
Because he's like, I don't want to be a villain. That's not the Tom Hanks brand.
But it's quite a scary thing. It does exist. It is available in a lot of different forms. I think it might actually be on the Pixar Animation YouTube channel, or at least clips from it are. But the trial and error that they were able to do to figure out, how does this work? How does this work with what we have? Because Pixar is the gold standard in how to use your limitations to make your storytelling better. Because they would figure out, oh, well, we technologically cannot do this. It causes the server room to catch on fire. And there are a lot of stories in the book of, we thought we could do this, and no. The technology could not handle this. So many black screens, so many servers, just...
So we changed it to do this instead.
And that's why a lot of these early stories are as powerful as they are, is because they had to figure out it had to work. They had no other option for it to work. Catmull was obsessed with computer animation from a very early, like when it was extremely impractical to make happen at all. And it was his life's work. Like, we are going to find a way to make this happen come hell or high water. And it's that struggle through the constraints that made the storytelling have to be so much better. Because when you look at, it's Jerry's Game, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what I was actually about. Like, I literally, and then hold up, Charlie's still talking.
They had so much trouble making this short.
I know, because Catmull talks about this, of like, they could do the texture on the chess pieces, or they could do Jerry's hair, but they couldn't do both because they couldn't process both. And like imagine committee meetings about which is going to be more important. And I mean, if you watch Jerry's Game, you can easily see which one they chose. But like, ultimately, though, what they decided was what's most important is actually the story. If the story is so good, people will not notice or care that there's not as much texture as they wanted there to be. That if you just make that story compelling enough, people won't notice your shortcomings. There's a certain truth to that, y'all. Like, like, if you make it compelling enough, if you make it interesting enough, if you keep giving it twists and turns that are a fun ride, people will forgive you for a lot of other shortcomings in storytelling. Yes, the snow globe. I think that's knick-knack.
And and I know writers, especially, we don't like to hear this. And the younger we are, the less we like to hear it, or the earlier in our writing career. But constraints are what make your story interesting. If this is where She Who Shall Not Be Named got messed up in the Wizarding School series that she wrote, is magic has no limitations in the early books.
Mm-hmm.
It can do anything and everything, and does do anything and everything. And thus, if that continued in the last 3 books, especially the last book, that would have been a boring book, because everything would have been fine. There would have been no struggles. There would have been no road of trials. None of that. So all of a sudden, constraints had to be manufactured out of nowhere. And why, when you talk about fans of that series, they always come back to, the magic felt weird in the last book. Is that just me? The magic felt weird. And it's because all of a sudden constraints had to come in.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're working with any kind of a constraint, no matter what it is, in a video I watched recently with Abigail Thorne, talking about this constraint that she put on herself when writing The Prince, that the majority of the dialogue should be in blank verse, iambic pentameter, so that the new text fit with the Shakespearean text, and then having to learn how to write in blank verse, iambic pentameter. Like, that is very much a constraint, but it is also liberating, because you have to find ways to make it work. You have to find ways for it to work with your style, with the language that you're wanting to put into it. And when you hear a swear-laden, angry woman yelling about how messed up life is in iambic pentameter in modern English, it is a beautiful, beautiful thing that I did not know I needed in my life. But that none of that phrasing would have come about without that constraint. It would have been very direct. It would have been probably a lot more vulgar and brusque, because sentences have to be padded when you have to have a certain number of syllables to make a line. You know, like, you have a quota. And you can see this when we're looking at what Pixar is doing. They knew that a film could only be so long, because again, computers would catch on fire. Like,
no, there was a lot of like bad fires. There was a lot of overheated servers. And
you could each frame is going to take so many days to render, so you can only do just so many frames for this short before you literally just don't have the years to put into letting it render.
Yeah.
And those kinds of constraints for us are word count, maybe like what I was talking about with Abigail and the iambic pentameter, putting these constraints on. And they really do make you have to focus on what you can actually squeeze out.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember the first time I saw Jerry's Game in the theater, and I was blown away by that short, because it's not even just that it was CG, which again, it's hard to explain with everything being CG nowadays, how mind-blowing
Yeah.
like going to see Bug's Life and Toy Story and all those were when they first came out. But
my mother was still talking about Jerry's Game the year she died. Like, it was part of her vernacular. And there practically was not anyone her age or older, like mom was a boomer, who by the mid 2000s, you could mention Jerry's Game to just about any older person. And they absolutely knew exactly what you're talking about, because it was like wildfire. It was so wildly popular, especially among older folks. Partly, I think, because they don't often see sympathetic depictions of people their age at that point. Now there's lots of depictions of older folks everywhere all the time. But in the 90s, even, there wasn't actually that many older roles for older actors. So, and let alone that was not just a plain old side character or a sympathetic character. So this was a kind of a big deal. Also, my mother just loved the twists and turns of the jokes. I feel like Peter Jackson definitely watched Jerry's Game and went, I've got ideas for Gollum. Like, I really genuinely believe, at least in how to frame it in a movie, composition, that Peter Jackson definitely directly lifted.
And you can also see how they did the one most important thing when dealing with animation. They remembered that it was animated.
Mm-hmm.
And that may sound like some weird circular sentence, but when you're working in a medium, it's important to remember what that medium can and cannot do, and what you can do in it that you cannot do in other media. And animation liberates you from a certain physicality that the human body, like physics requires the human body to do certain things. Like, you can't do some of the broad smiles and the mischievous grins with most human faces that you see in something like Jerry's Game, or the whimsy of the creatures in Bounding. There's a lot that you can do in animation that you cannot do if you're just filming someone sitting in a park playing a game. Like, there are things you can't do. And that's where the short story really comes in and shines, because short stories are about emotion, big emotion, punchy emotion, making you feel something, making whatever that feeling is that you're going for. That a novel, it can have those moments, and you'll learn things that will help you bring those moments to life in your longer fiction. But you don't get to just have it be a celebration of that feeling like you do when you're doing a short story.
Mm-hmm.
And you can really see in, especially Jerry's Game, there's so much wit and I am going to beat you. Like, just that childish play, but matured childish play. I don't know how to construct the sentence. I'm sorry. But that is at work there, that would be not impossible to capture in live action, but
Jerry's facial expressions are amazing in that.
Yes.
Part.
Yeah.
Like, the actors in Doctor Who wish they could emote that wonderfully and clearly. Years ago, when I was totally obsessed with Doctor Who, I can't remember, I watched some short documentary. I think it was centering on Stephen Moffat as the showrunner at the time. And I think they were talking about their search for a new doctor to hire. And he talked about with the Doctor, when you're auditioning actors for the Doctor, and also he said for companions, but pretty much everybody in Doctor Who, one of the things they look for, since in part it is a kid's show, Chibnall, it is a kids show, is that the actors all must be able to have facial expressions that emote very clearly and quickly, constantly. And essentially, the doctor, his companions, and most of the actors, in fact, for the show, with the exception of those that are under a lot of prosthetics, are hired specifically for their facial expressions as well as their voice tonation.
I mean, if you think about it, what's her face who plays the lizard lady?
Yes.
In
I
19th
can't remember her
century.
name. Yes.
I mean, she emotes amazingly well for as much
She's under a
prosthetics as she's wearing.
amount of prosthetics, and it's thick prosthetics in order to make the scales. But and then she uses her voice to make up the difference of like where you can't see like the tops of her forehead, those kind of facial expressions. So, but like I really started noticing after that, after I had watched that like short little thing, maybe it was from like a Comic-Con type panel or something where he was talking about it. But I started noticing that one of the reason I think partly why I love Doctor Who so much, at least the earlier years, is that those British actors do emote very clearly and very understandably, and their tonation is very clear, and they truly do transmit various emotions very quickly and clearly in the show, and I find that much easier to understand them versus there are other BBC shows I am just not into, and it's mostly when I realized that I started watching going, oh, it's because I have no idea what is this person's emotion. Are they happy they're a villain? Or are they like feeling they're maligned? I have no clue. And I realized that that's actually the difference between the British shows I like and the British shows I don't like. And then I do tend to gravitate toward watching British shows that have people who have at least guested on Doctor Who, because it means they can emote. It matters.
It's probably in part why we like, those Warner Brother movies so much is, a lot of the actors were, also from Doctor Who.
Mm-hmm. It's important to make the emotional weight obvious. Ditto for writers. It is important. And to bring back one of my old editors, do not rely on the ly words for this. Like he literally would, like, if the article you submit has more than 6 lys, I'm striking it. We're not printing it. Like it's like, I don't care how long or short it is. There's your limit. He's like, and if you abuse the 6 lys, I'm going to make it 3. Like that's what he said. But the point though he was trying to make is, don't tell people the emotion. You need to show it. You need to show it through descriptions of their facial expressions, and like you need to explain what's going on so that any emotion a person you're writing about has, it's very clear to the reader without telling them the feeling.
And that's where it really
sadly,
and that's where a really well crafted simile or metaphor can really help with that, because I know in a lot of my early drafts, am very trapped in the physicality of the characters, and I'm always telling you what their face, eyes, head is doing. Like, first drafts of my stories, everyone's a bobblehead. Everyone's just a bobbleheaded fool. They're nodding and shaking their heads, and their eyes are going crazy because I'm trying to capture the emotion. And my experience of writing is, I kind of see the story and I'm trying to capture it as fast as I can in words. So it's easier for me to do it that way. But you have to find ways to convey that emotion in other respects. And this is, again, we're watching Pixar helps, because not to push on from Jerry's game, but Bounding is about exuberance. It is exuberance of the motion picture in every possible way. What is a good simile or metaphor for exuberance?
And we see it on both sides, because we see both what does the minimum of exuberance look like?
Mm-hmm.
And then we see what is the maximum. Like, we do see that full spectrum difference.
And I don't know why that. I'm pretty sure it's a jackalope.
Yes, it's a jackalope.
Yes, they say so. It's an American jackalope.
Versus the European jackalope.
I don't know why the jackalope is such a perfect metaphor for exuberance, but it works so well, because if it was just a rabbit, like, I mean, it would work.
I gotta be honest, that jackalope looks like he's wearing a rabbit suit in the thing. That's the one thing I find distracting.
And
oh, really? Because I thought it was, they said jackalopes, so they didn't have to worry about Hollywood coming for them, because it's Harvey. It's a puka.
It's Harvey with horns.
Yes.
The
American puka has shown up in the
Midwest. Right, yeah. So the American, made himself little, to be relatable to this sheep, this poor naked sheep.
But those horns are one of the things that really help the story, because you're like, oh, it's truly a magical thing. And that's because that's the message they're trying to get across in the movie. And it's like why we only remember Shakespeare's Hamlet, and it's not because of the propaganda movement pushing Shakespeare. There were so many Hamlets that were written before Shakespeare's Hamlet.
Yes.
But he, for some reason, and I'm assuming it's so that all the people with the cauliflower baskets on their head would be happy, added a ghost to the story. And it's this weird, unexpected element that when you look at any of the discourse, even to this day, all of the discourse is, but is that a manifestation of his guilt? Is that signs that he's going through a mental collapse? Is this actually a supernatural story? And he's actually seeing the ghost of his dead father? That unexpected element makes you start questioning the world, especially when you fit it into the story in a way that doesn't make it feel like, oh, there's a ghost here now. And the fact that this jackalope is just there, living its life, and we're
not giving it a backstory.
We're not giving it a backstory.
The jackalope is so distracting. We're going to stop questioning the Irish dancing gophers. Prairie dogs.
Yes. Like, why are they river dancing prairie dogs here?
By comparison, who cares?
That is perfectly normal.
Prairie dogs to do this. The jackalope, of course.
Of course. Those unexpected elements, especially when you learn how to do them in short fiction, like we were talking about with some of the others, like turning the love story in Lava into volcanoes that are in love, right? It's that unexpected element that attracts your attention and makes you go, wait, what? And makes you start thinking about things differently. It makes you, it draws you in and makes you start questioning, well, what am I seeing? What am I seeing here? That's a rabbit with horns. Like, if you've never heard of a jackalope, like, I'm pretty sure, like, I can only imagine what in foreign markets this movie looked like to people. Like, why is there a rabbit with horns? Like, why is this a thing? I do not understand what is going on.
I could definitely see China being confused of, like, is that supposed to be a deer?
Yeah, like, is that like a fuzzy rabbity deer? Versus it's a magical creature in American folklore. It's a puka, y'all.
But it attracts your attention, and especially if you're dealing with stuff for kids, and this is one of the more kidsy. I feel like a lot of the short films are like, for the adults, here is our grand thing that will sate you until we get to the more adult themes that are hidden in the story when we make you cry and destroy everything that you thought was good and proper in the world. You know, a Pixar movie. But it's for a child, it's colorful, it's bright. That rabbit has horns. Even if that kid doesn't know what a jackalope is, that rabbit has horns. Like, it's that moment of excitement that gives you a visual hook into the story.
That is actually part of why I included Bounden in this, even though it's a little bit later, it's a little bit different from the other ones in this hour, is I wanted to show you can inject folklore and cryptids in a short story and give them zero backstory. You don't have to explain them. You don't have to say anything about them other than right now, here's a cryptid I'd like to introduce as a character, da 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 da. Or as a monster. Here's a cryptid that's a monster, everybody run. Like the characters know more about the cryptid, but you as the writer are not explaining the cryptid to the reader, and you could still get away with this. Because one of the things I have noticed, particularly in short stories, is many writers who are trying to, write lore about, American mythology and folklore over explain. No, you know what? If the reader is that interested, they can go research it themselves after they enjoy this story. You don't have to explain crap.
Like, that's one of the things I definitely liked, and, why I can recommend Laura's book that's coming out, of Tiny Shivers.
Yep.
Yes.
Is two of her longer stories don't over explain. They just rely on, current understandings. Both the one that takes place in the 80s and the other one that takes place underground. Of you're just there along for the adventure. We don't need this extra detail because it should show up in the story as it's needed.
And so particularly with short stories, you don't need to explain crap, y'all. You don't need to explain anything that you don't want to. And quite honestly, even if you want to explain backstory, it would probably be better if you did that to a minimum or not at all, in order to not disrupt the flow of the story reading. So I really wanted to bring that up at some point, and that was why I incorporated bounding. Also, I frankly just like that short story. I mean, that short. Look, the bottom line is these are shorts I like. I didn't include the ones I hate. Sue me. It's my show and I can do what I want.
But it's pure joy. Which, when you're writing a short story, but no, what I'm saying is, if your theme for your short story is joy, it should come out, maybe not like a carbon copy of Bounding, but Bounding is such a good example of that, because it's start to finish with that dark moment of what's going to happen now. Just a little bit of concern, but not enough to scare children. Sorry, I've been a couple movies lately that people need to realize what kids can handle. Anyway, but it gets its point across so clearly and right from the get-go. Like, if you don't understand in the first 2 seconds of that short what you're getting into, you may need to see a doctor. Because it's instantaneous. Like, you're instantly, oh, okay, that's what this is going to be. Okay, and you decide if you're in for the ride or not.
And also using cowboy poetry to have that again as another way to establish that exuberance from the start. This tight rhyming, this very, very much a traditional American cowboy poetry style, which I really think a lot of children, let alone adults, were introduced to with Bounding. They were not familiar with cowboy poetry. I am more familiar with it only because my parents were obsessed with the Prairie Home Companion show, and Garrison Keillor was obsessed with cowboy poetry and would recite other famous cowboy poets, as well as he would make his own attempts and read those, because I think he used to have a poetry episode. Yeah. And that is why I'm familiar with it. But honestly, if my parents weren't into a Prairie Home Companion, I, a person who practically lived at various public libraries growing up and as an adult, not a single library in South Mississippi that I went to at least had any cowboy poetry checked in, let alone that I would be able to find. So it wasn't in the kids section. And often the poetry section and the adult section is so small and the stuff hasn't been returned. So, you're never going to see it. So again, I just thought this was such a cool way to introduce, maybe you as a writer have a personal sort of weird little obsession with some form of poetry or some kind of, maybe you have always been practicing sonnets and you don't want to admit to people. Or like me, when I am super tired, and when I say super tired, I mean I've been awake for 23 or more hours straight. And Tom can back me up on this. For some reason, my brain starts talking in haiku. And everything I say will be in haiku form. In the basic haiku, is it 575?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I don't know why this happens, and it will keep happening. I have been up for 40 hours before, with airport travel, and I only talk in haikus, and then other stewardesses and airline employees have noticed, are you speaking in haiku? Because it's something my brain does, but it's something essentially, if I stay up really late, I could actually write whole stories in haiku, and it is wild. But maybe you have something like that, and here is a way to share it with others. Hey, maybe your brain writes in cowboy poetry when you're super tired or something. I don't know. This is a great way to kind of show it off, to have a good time, explore it, while telling essentially a very simple story about, look, sometimes the world strips you naked, and you just have to roll with it and hop with it. Hey.
All we have to do is compliment her and she appears.
Yes, if you speak of her, she will come. So I just wanted to share that as well, of bounding is kind of unusual, both for its American folklore, cryptids, but also American cowboy poetry is its own thing, y'all. And it is very cool, and other countries are jealous of us for it. I'm not kidding. I have traveled enough. It's weird. It's but you live in Asia. Why do you care that that we have American cowboy poets? But I wish we had cowboy poets here in Thailand. Who cares? But apparently some people. So again, you can explore this with short stories. You don't have to write an entire novel in cowboy poetry. You don't have to write an entire novel in haiku. But you can write a short story in that and have a good time. Have fun with it. Share your obsession with others.
It's safe to be weird in short fiction because it's not a large investment.
Right. Well, I guess it's about time for us to do a little sprinty sprint. And when we come back, we will talk about bow, pearl, float, out, and 20-something. We'll see what we get through. But essentially, we'll talk about bow and then a bunch of spark shorts. Because I just want to talk about that dumpling baby more. Okay? The truth is, I want to talk about that bow baby. He's so freaking cute. Oh, my God. It's just so cute. Oh, my God.
Before Baby Yoda.
Before Baby Yoda, there was Bow Baby. He was awesome. And also, Tom and I very much enjoyed watching that, going, is she insane? I think she may be she's gone around the bend. Where did her husband go? So fun discussion points. Anyhow, now may be a lovely time to make sure you have a snack. It is snack time, is it not? It's snack time.
It's always snack time.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you. Appreciate you backing me up on this. It is always snack time, y'all. At the very least, it is always time for chocolate. I genuinely believe this. I will die on this hill. And now, hello, Everett. It is a wonderful time to maybe make sure you have something to drink. Hydrate or dihydrate. That is us. And we will see y'all in a few minutes. Meebity beep. Meebity beep. Meebity beep beep beep. Boom. Meebity beep. Meebity beep. Meebity beep beep beep. Boom, boom. Welcome, welcome back.
Hello.
Hello, hello.
This episode is now being filmed live before a live studio audience.
Pretty much.
Before we went on to Val and the Others, I did want to bring up a little bit about For the Birds. Because I thought it also, For the Birds, it makes a great case in point of the basis for this simile or just the core concept could just as easily be, being the new kid at school, being the new person in work, or just being an outsider. But since we're making it about birds, it could be any of them. And like that is sort of the secret of sci-fi and fantasy, why people enjoy it, is it could be about any situations we feel related to, instead of being specific to one.
Mm-hmm.
Like we'll see later with Pearl. And that, again, we take all of the associated thoughts and phrases with that outsider, and we're going to rearrange it into a new story of, all these, as Maggie put, all these little blue Karens and one big awkward bird. Of, we even see the whole getting pantsed situation, except in this case, the twist is all the little blue Karens get pantsed at the end. And are now, without feathers.
It's very relatable, especially, if you're neurodivergent. And very much that big bird definitely gives a bunch of whistles for being neurodivergent, in that the big blue bird is not picking up on various cues from the little birds.
Yeah.
And because it's missing those cues, like that's what I mean about these whistles for being neurodivergent. And then, the tables turn and the little bluebirds are naked, being laughed at. Ha 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 ha.
By their own actions.
By their very meanness is what got them defeathered. Oh, it's the justice of it. It feels so good. But it's still relatable, even for adults. We have those experiences where we're the new person at work and like, oh no, everybody brings their lunch. Nobody goes out to eat at lunch, or whatever it is that on Wednesdays we always wear pink. All right, Karen, whatever. Maybe I don't like pink. Maybe it makes me look even just redder.
Maybe like Wednesday, we're just allergic to color.
Yeah, like seriously, can we not just wear black, Mom, all the time? No, you don't live in New York, so you can't get away with it.
Wednesday is goth day.
But I think this also goes into like the intergenerational appeal of something like Dr. Seuss, who the brilliance of those stories is they're not about real anythings. And so you can project yourself, your family, your circumstances into so many of those stories and identify, because what is a who? What are any of these creatures? And it really, I see what you're trying to do, but my live studio audience brought me caramel bugles, and they're the new crack.
Those are super yummy. I will give you that.
And I wear black when I want.
Well, my live studio audience brought me Shipley's Donuts, and I got an apple frigate.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah. So I made fresh coffee.
But yeah, just that's the thing I want to bring up. It's like the same for Dr. Seuss. Why Dr. Seuss stays perennial is it doesn't rely on any cultural context.
Mm-hmm.
It creates its own.
It's hard to feel dated when you're not using references to anything current.
I mean, even what was it? I don't remember what it's actually called. I say the one about the Butter Wars.
Oh yeah.
Oh God,
Butter
yes.
side up or butter side down.
Yes.
It doesn't matter what culture you're in, you can still relate to that because you still put something on top of food. That's all that's required to understand the sentiment.
When I was a kid, I was just like, who butters side down?
You gotta taste the butter first, you know? You take a bite.
And my mother was like, well,
The answer to that is Laura, apparently.
my mother was like, well, maybe like he just made it up for the book, right? And then I grow up and I meet all these people who literally eat their toast butter side down. And I'm just like, truly, you don't know how the other half lives. Buzz, buzz, Maggie. Buzz, buzz. All right, I will go ahead and show you. This is my fritter.
You almost made me say a bad word on your channel.
It's okay. We're deep enough in.
I will say the second word was you. And the third word was that.
I deserve it.
I just want to know how you train the cat to bring you a fritter.
With a lot of patience and treats. Smoked meat. I don't know what to tell you.
See, now you have to get the smoker.
Yeah.
See, Roy would go get the fritter and then eat it on the way back.
Oh, well, that's true. Street bread.
Yeah,
But Mom, I was on the street, so it was automatically street bread.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Half the time, our dog has almost a nervous breakdown if food falls on the floor because she is the world's most polite dog. And she just looks at you like, please say yes, please say yes, please say yes. And she just, her eyes just keep going back and forth between the food and you, and the food and you, and just, my whole body starts shaking. Like, please say yes, please, please.
We'll discuss this more when we talk about Doug Days.
Not to jump the gun here, but pretending to obey is hard. Okay, so let's see, where are we? Oh, bow, baby.
Which I still feel should be rated PG, not G.
Yes, spoiler.
There is a moment of just horror.
Like, even though I've seen this so many times, when Tom and I were watching it yesterday, I was just like, oh, I still gasped. It was like, no.
I cannot for the life of me remember what movie that was attached to, but in the special features on that disc, they had the creator of Bao with her mom making Bao and shared their family recipe for Bao.
Oh, that's awesome.
And it's very good. We made it.
Well, like, one of the other reasons I wanted to include Bao is Bao led to Red Panda.
Well, Seeing Red.
Yeah,
Seeing Red. That it led to that entire movie was they saw Bao, you know, like the powers that be at Pixar.
Incredibles
very
2.
much enjoyed Bao.
That's right.
What?
It was on Incredibles 2.
Okay. And was like, hey, would you be interested in, you know, essentially workshopping to make a full-length movie? And, you know, after she was done screaming into pillows in joy and excitement and fear, she, from what I understand from the extra features I saw on Disney Plus for Seeing Red.
Turning Red,
sorry. She immediately went back to the person, like the whole team that helped her make Bao, and was like, who wants to be part of this? So again, like, I'm just so thrilled. I love Seeing Red. I have watched it so many times. It's so relatable. Y'all, I've told you before, I'm going to tell you again. I started going through puberty as my mom started going through menopause. It was not a good time at our house. It was like two warring gods just going. It was bad. Tom was there for part of it, and then Dad was afraid Tom would be caught in the middle, and literally had Tom shipped out to Arizona to protect him.
Yeah, our father had already flown away.
Yeah, Dad had escaped and was like, "Not
I'm out of here. I can't handle this."
Right? And was like, "Boy, we need to get you out of there before your mother kills you."
All I'm hearing is you actually lived through that kaiju sequence at the end of the movie.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh, like,
Oh yeah. Once Gloria came back from overseas, yeah, her and our mom, yeah, that's pretty much a good descriptor right there.
It took years to heal the wounds that we created when I was a teenager and she was going through menopause. And it was just, yeah. So, yes, I very much enjoy that movie. And so, again, let's talk about Bao, which led to that movie and really showed like this wonderful emotional, like a full arc. So normally we talk about in short stories, you don't have to do a full arc, but in Bao, she shows what is Domeshi?
Yeah.
The writer and director. She shows you can actually do an entire emotional arc from start to finish with redemption in there for both characters, in that the relationship is redeemed in this little package, this tiny little baby package.
It's about 7 minutes.
Thank you, because I forgot to look and see how long it is.
I just watched it during the
I
break.
appreciate that. Yes. God bless you, Jen. Good luck, honey. Remember, when in doubt, just walk out on your teenager. Just literally walk out outside and like just, oh, well, I needed to take a walk. Just walk rather than like get into a slam fest with your teenager in a hallway. Don't be like my mother.
Let's reenact WrestleMania.
It was not a good time.
For me, I think the most powerful thing about Bao is every time I watch it, the movie means something different to me. And I don't mean like I saw more layers or like I deepened my experience with it. It's like, no, I have a different experience of that film every time I see it, depending on what's going on in my life. It's really done well in that I don't know how to say this without sounding insulting about it. The generic specificity of the plot can fit a lot of scenarios that you're going through. And so depending on what is actually happening in my life, like if I watch it after having a fight with my mother, I really see the family aspects of it coming out. I watched it recently, as some of you might know, I have a serial releasing over on my Substack, projectshadow.com. Go subscribe.
At first I was like, Magic Spoon cereal?
And it really felt like when I watched it this time, I was like, this is my baby story going out into the world and everyone's going to have all of these problems. And like whatever is going on.
The baby story is going to marry someone else and I don't know that she knows how to make Bao.
I mean, well, this kind of brings up the point of, in shorts, we write it around an emotion. We do not write it around in general, a true story arc. We write it around an emotion. And that is the experience you have. And an emotion happens in so many different situations. That same emotional set, even as Charlie describes with Bao, of that feeling on being on both sides of this situation happens throughout our lives. It's not just one time it's going to happen where you feel this. It happens many times. And so many different types of audiences will all enjoy this in different ways, for different reasons. But enjoyment will be had by all.
And this is the line that I draw in the sand when I think of something as art. You know what I'm saying? That big capital A art, right? That so many people are either
literary fiction.
Oh, literary fiction, literature. It's literature.
If I can go back to it over and over again and find something new, if it's always fresh. It's always opening up to me and giving me an experience that I need in that moment. That to me is what makes art art. Whether it's a painting or a song or whatever, if it's able to speak to me in the moment and not just as a nostalgic view, not just, oh, I remember liking this, or oh, I love the humor in this again. If it can continue to talk to me and make me feel something or understand something fresh and new, that to me is when something has elevated into that, like, this will be in the canon of whatever genre we're talking about forever. And Bao is so deceptively simple and so deceptively cute as a story, but it has this earnestness, this genuineness to it that you can. It's back to what I was saying earlier, and I've been fixating on this thing that Guillermo del Toro said at the Oscars. You know, animation is cinema, and so many people forget that when they're doing animation, and they're like, I'm going to make a kids movie, or I'm going to make, you know, and they don't take it seriously and they don't play around with what you can do. Like, there's no way to make a live action version of Bao. You can't, this needs to be an animated movie. It would, we talk about wondering if she's lost her mind. If this was a real story about a woman who made a Bao that comes to life.
Okay, first off, I mean, yes, the little dumpling baby would have to be a puppet. But second off, I'm going to tell you, there are two production groups that would totally do it as a live action. And one of them is Fairy Tale Theater. And the other is the Jim Henson Production Workshop. You know, they both would let's go real dark. Yeah, that'll be fun. For children. Dark.
I mean, you're not wrong.
I'm not trying to say no, Charlie, no. But I just be no, I can think of two off the top of my head because I loved them.
But what I'm saying is it remembers that it's animated and it takes full advantage of the medium in which it's in to tell its story. And that's why it works in the way that it does. Because it doesn't pull any punches. Like, when you say it gets dark, like there was a moment in there I was, first time I saw it, it was just
yeah, every time I watch that part, I tend to gasp. She did it. She did the thing. She put the baby back inside. I know, because I've worked in childcare so many decades, moms, no matter how young or old I am, moms talk to me about how there are times where I wish I could just shove them back in so I didn't have to worry about them. Ma'am, thank God, no. And then there she, in the cartoon, in the animation, the character actually does it. She does the thing that so many mothers fantasize about fine, that way you can't leave. You can't go anywhere. I'm so tired of you wandering off. Because, as they say, having a child is like taking your heart and letting it run around independent of you. It is the scariest, most wonderful, exhilarating thing you'll ever do. And there's a certain truth in that. But then she swallows the baby.
Not to entirely change subject, but to talk about recognizing that what your medium is and using it to its strongest. Another one we were going to talk about is Pearl. And watching it this time, I really noticed that to show the difference between Pearl and the rest of the bros.
The tech bros. The investment bros, excuse me.
The investment bros. Was that while the bros are all traditionally animated, Pearl is animated on, I want to say the 3s, I think, maybe even the 4s, in a stop motion style, so that she truly stands out. So her motion and movement is very different than theirs. Just by the nature of how they have her animated. And so she stands out even more. And then they change that when she knits herself to be more like a bro with a little suit. Still love that little suit.
It still has a little like implied lace in it. It's so cute.
But we then see them change the animation of her to be in line with the rest of the guys so that she now moves in the same rhythm as they do. Again, as that use all the elements you have to get these point across.
Mm-hmm.
Versus when we are writing it, we can do it in how long the sentences are, in the structure, how spaced the lines are.
The
You want
vocabulary, what the characters, like the vocabulary they use, the jargon they use.
Mhm.
You can use it that way too, where she's using different metaphors and similes to discuss versus the other characters.
And, I know I've just recently watched The Prince, so it's very full in my mind, but the way that Jen and Sam talk so differently from everyone else, like they speak in modern vernacular English, well, British English, and everyone else is speaking in this kind of high Shakespearean language through the vast majority of the play. And the fact that the first time we meet Jen, she talks like we do. You immediately have a moment of, wait a minute, what's going on here? It makes you focus on her character, and the way that when you aren't even paying attention to it, that the fact that the vast majority of Jen and Sam's dialogue, even though it's in modern vernacular English, is still written in iambic pentameter blank verse.
Mm-hmm.
Like it fits within the rhyme and the reason of the story that it's taking place in, but it stands out and it makes you pay attention to them to the point where you see the vernacular English, the modern English, seeping into everyone else's dialogue. It's a wonderful storytelling device that I have not seen used in the way that it's used in this particular play before. And that's something that I would love to see a lot more writers play around with, is this idea of how can you shift your language use in a way that works, in a way that makes sense. I've seen a lot of fantasy stories and sci-fi stories where you don't even realize it's happening until it's happening. That, what was the book? The book that came out not that long ago where one of the aliens always speaks in haiku, but it's never written out like a haiku. It's just written in sentence, in like regular dialogue. And it's not until you're like, why is there this like poetic nature to everything this character says? And they always seem to speak in chunks. They don't seem to, and then all of a sudden you realize, oh crap, that species always speaks in haiku.
And the same for that's not discussed enough because you don't really see the written form often. But I mean, most of Charles Dickens' well-known works were actually written in different styles.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Again, these little constraints, they'll give it character and detail and depth. Of as I said, like with Pearl, we see it visually. And to a lesser degree, we also see it in the conversational styles they each have. Because we see all the bros having classic bro conversational style. Including, who's up for going to get 2-for-1 wings at Swifties?
Oh, God.
Versus we hear more of, fiber arts, conversational style out of Pearl.
Yeah, she's using jargon from fiber arts and metaphors of a fiber art nature of like, let's knit together with, the other department and so on. And they're like, no, absolutely not. Versus later, we see her trying to mimic their jargon by saying, we're going to crush them over there. Like, yeah.
And little things like that really do matter in how we're telling our stories. Because the one thing that in this modern age of right to market schlock that is just being pumped out, that attention to detail starts getting missed. And it can be hard, especially because I know a lot of us are indie published and are working on self-imposed deadlines because we need them pennies, y'all.
Mm-hmm.
But when you start practicing these techniques in short story and get it to the point where it's second nature, it's something that can start appearing in your earlier drafts and take less time to get into your final stories. And finding those little tricks that you can do that add flavor. Like I hate saying it because I do love epic fantasy so much, but I have stopped reading a lot of epic fantasy because it's become the McDonald's of literary genres. It's fine. It's exactly what you signed up for. Yeah, that's technically a beef patty on a bun. That you meet the minimum requirement for what I expected when I got here. Thank you. That those fries are technically potatoes. Yes, they have been fried. Yes, thank you. But the seasoning isn't there. That spice isn't there. That attention to detail that when you read like a Terry Pratchett or a Neil Gaiman or any of the great masters of the craft, even a J.R.R. Tolkien, you can see this like over the top British gossipiness in so much of his fiction that I've recently, as my go to bed book, have started listening to Andy Serkis reading The Hobbit, and he leans into all of the gossipiness of the narration so hard that it's delicious. But that
it's often forgotten why this particular genre gets big at this timing. Like to me, like one of the case in points is the 80s coming back into vogue with nostalgia and stuff. Like that is part of what made Stranger Things so popular, was that they really got a lot of the details right. Another, same for Final Girls, and also actually I liked Laura's little piece in Tiny Shivers with when we do the 80s horror, and the with what if they were right about D&D being demonic and leading children astray into the clutches of the devils. But the
Lovecraftian beings, yo.
But the writing style and the conversation is correct for the time, so the pastiche works. It is entertaining because it's in the 80s, not in spite of it being in the 80s. Like it adds additional elements so that it's enjoyable, versus, at least for me, kind of where I agree with Charlie about the high fantasy getting boring is there's not much uniqueness. It's high fantasy, but I could just as easily put this into sci-fi without a problem.
I was watching
the story doesn't need to be high fantasy.
I was watching something the other day, and they were talking about a fantasy book that I had recently read, and they described it as the unfiltered ramblings of somebody's D&D group going, give me a quest. Thank you. Where's the potion for this? Thank you. I'm going to go fulfill everything. Can I have my XP now? And
wow.
Yeah, and it wasn't a lit RPG. That was not, but it just, once I heard them say that, I was like, oh yeah, that's what that book felt like. It was a player just wanting to run through because they wanted to level their character up in a tabletop role-playing game, and just like, no, the dialogue's fine. Where's the wizard with the potion? And a lot of that flavor is lost. A lot of that uniqueness is lost. And, I don't fault a lot of these writers. A lot of them have fallen for the right to market and all of that other BS that's really overly dominant in writing spaces. But for so many of us who want to be the next Tolkien, the next, Jim Butcher, whatever, pick your favorite, fantasy writer, you're not going to do that if you don't stand out. Like, the reason the Dresden Files stand out is those are very Jim Butcher books. Like, they are his voice. They're very much his voice. And while I've read a lot of magical detective books, they stand out because, well, only Jim Butcher would be like, what if he just stopped solving crimes and became a professional fighter for a while? What if? Why not? And
I mean, it's the same reason why every few years I go back to go listen to Charles Strauss, and the
Laundry Files.
Laundry Files, because it's, I have a degree in, networking, and it's very much what if the Dilbert universe existed with Lovecraft? And that's the Laundry Files, is, what if Catbert was more normal than we thought?
that's hilarious.
Catbert's one of my favorite characters.
But that's putting that flavor in. That's putting that spice in that. And we as writers have to find that for ourselves. Like, you really have to find your own voice. Like, the reason I picked Jim Butcher is not because I think he's the greatest writer in any of these genres these days, but his voice is so unique.
Yeah.
Like, you can spot a Jim Butcher story without anyone telling you he wrote it. It is so his style, and that is so rare with modern writers. Like, the writers I can think of in the fantasy genre that have that all got their start either being mentored by the greats, like with Robert Jordan and Brandon Sanderson, right? So Robert Jordan, again, has his very unique style and basically taught Brandon Sanderson all of that, right? But they're all in that older guard. The newer writers that are coming up are not putting a lot of that new stuff in.
This is the story that never ends.
I just feel like, why do you have to keep bringing up trauma for my marriage? And then Tom's smiling like, yes, I was forced to read a lot of Robert Jordan and Brandon Sanderson in my marriage by my ex-husband. No, Claire, you'll understand me if you read this. 30 days later.
Days? Isn't it more like years?
Well, I'm a speed reader.
Okay.
I'm trying so desperately to get through this so I can go back to reading what I want to read. You know what? Shortcut, the elves suck. Anyway.
I love Wheel of Time, but it's a lot of books. And half of the books retcon the previous books, so
that is when I literally threw down the book and said, "No, you can't make me read this nonsense anymore." Because what is the point of reading it if it's going to retcon? I'm done.
It's the same problem as what's it, Artemis Fowl?
Yeah,
and that is why I did not get beyond. Was like, well, F this. I have a life to live.
I still haven't read the last Artemis Fowl book yet.
You just read Wikipedia. Read the Wikipedia synopsis and move on with your life. I'm just saying. You'll miss nothing. Nothing.
I love the first 3 books so much.
Kitty?
You can,
there's a dress.
Artemis Fowl is
a dress we have over there that has tulle. And if you hear this scratching sound, it is her playing with the tulle of this dress from, our model clothes.
Artemis Fowl, I feel like, is a case in point of what happens when you're writing to market.
Yeah.
Because each book is written to market and so has to retcon the previous stuff because the market's changed in 2 years.
and honestly, and I know I will never find it. Like, he has left us, and we shall have no more. But I'm looking for that next Terry Pratchett. Not somebody who writes exactly like him or anything, but someone who has that voice and that interesting idea of story that is so different from what I'm accustomed to reading. Because what's the point of reading a fantasy story if it's, oh, hi, it's the same elves that have been in everything ever again. Hi. Glad to see you here. Oh, look, and it's the dwarves, and I bet they're going to make the joke about the bearded women. There it is! It's tiring.
Now, in fairness, Terry Pratchett also made the joke about the bearded women.
But it's funny.
It was funny. It was very funny. It was absolutely hilarious. So, before we finish the hour, we do have Float out at 20-something. Anybody have any words about them they just want to get out?
I apologize for my tangent.
No. You don't need to apologize for being yourself. That's where this is We're like that. You don't need to apologize. But it's just one of these of, hey,
what I think about all of them actually is they all illustrate the same point to me, which is living in uncertainty creates our own hells, because all of them find their happy place when they just accept the world for what it is and then go, the world has to accept me for who I am, or we can't exist together. Of, how parents create the hell of raising their children and float. How, children create their hell with their parents in Out.
there.
And that their parents already knew all their secrets for the most part.
Yep.
They just were waiting for the child to bring it up.
Sasha. Sorry, I'm distracted by a dog. There is one Artemis Fowl movie. Do not watch it.
Yeah, no one who likes Artemis Fowl talks about that movie.
Yeah.
Not quite as bad as The Last Airbender, but bad.
Yeah, just live your life without it.
I'm sure it might make sense if you were more familiar with the book. It felt so
Well,
Cliff Notes.
okay. The
if you're familiar with
trailer
the book,
had
it's
a
actually
scene from the
worse.
book. That scene wasn't in the movie.
Yeah, no, the movie actually, if you're familiar with the book, the movie's even worse.
Oh, wow.
They filmed it. They did the effects for the. It's there. Why isn't it in the movie?
Why does it feel like a Cliff's Notes or Sparks Notes or whatever the kids are reading these days?
Why is Artemis surfing?
Because they're trying to appeal to the audience left over from...
Percy Jackson?
No, another young adult one where he's essentially a young James Bond.
Oh, yeah. It's not the one I'm thinking.
Not like it's... I want to say Maximum Ride, but it's not that one.
My mind went to, what was it, Agent Cody Banks, but that's
what
true.
I went to.
No. What is it? Nicholas Flamel?
No.
The Alchemist?
Stop it.
Yeah, no. But there is a series.
My socks, you little fiend.
But there is another
Nice
series that they were
Alex
trying
Rider.
to get the audience for Artemis Fowl. Like, essentially, I guess it was because they'd already made 2 movies in this series, and I guess this was a script left over for the third that they didn't make because the actor aged out. And they try to convert over to Artemis Fowl by putting in some scenes.
Alex Rider?
Yes, that one.
Maggie came through for us.
Thank you.
I have no idea.
Maggie
I've never heard of
always
Alex
took the
Rider,
Florence.
or at least I have no current memory. So.
Yeah, the Artemis Fowl movie is essentially Alex Rider with elves.
Which high concept can give you a good result if you actually like massage the idea into something good, but it's kind of like throwing water, yeast, and flour into a bowl and going, I made dough without kneading it.
Yeah, that's fair.
Like, there was some really fun world building with Artemis Fowl, with like a centaur being the techno whiz and security. Like, yes, I love Foley. But, like, literally wears a tinfoil hat. It was so fun. I love those books.
The movie is just a big giant Y.
Yeah.
Actually, yeah, CB, and to translate this into Simpsons, they did a Poochie the movie.
Yeah.
I think that might be the easiest way to understand what the Artemis Fowl movie is. It's Poochie the movie, except for the dog is played by a human child.
Yeah.
And Itchy and Scratchy are some kind of fae?
Yeah.
I like 20-something. I thought it was cute to see a bunch of kids in a coat.
I thought it was very honest. Who in their 20s does not feel that at some points?
Like 3 kids in a coat.
3 to 5.
I don't feel like that.
Yeah.
Essentially, it's why millennials, got famous for using the term adulting.
Yeah. Because we're not feeling it, we're just acting through it, you know? We're just playing at being an adult.
Waiting for them to figure us out.
It doesn't feel natural. It doesn't feel instinctive.
That's capitalism for you.
Mm-hmm. So I thought it very nicely showed. I do think it is interesting which Spark Shorts are available on YouTube and which ones are not. And I definitely think there's corporate reasons for that.
The Chaos Demon's in the other room going, what, like capitalism?
Yeah.
Anyway, when we come back, we will discuss Doug Days. It is a series of shorts that are essentially done in an anthology style of what happened to Doug and the old man after the movie Up. Like, didn't you wonder what happened? Doug, spoilers, did not end up in a shelter or living on a plateau. And the old man did not have a heart attack and die. They have a happily ever after together where there is, I think, to some degree, a bit of character development going on. So we will discuss Doug Days. And in the meantime, does your drink need refilling?
My brain needs refilling.
I mean, I think people
funny.
might need to get some tea made because I have very unpopular opinions about Up. I have aired them in the past and realized I am in probably a minority of one.
About what?
Up.
Oh.
It's not one of my favorites. However, I do really like the Doug Days anthology series. And I think it shows, like, each one of these actually stand alone quite well. But together they do give a little, like, after arc. As well as they're just very relatable. And also they are about a dog. It's fun. A dog with a talking device. What is not to love? He's a golden retriever.
Squirrel.
So, huh?
Squirrel.
Yeah, and I think they missed out on the opportunity to discuss street bread, Laura. I think that needs to be a new thing. So we'll see y'all in a few minutes. Me, me, me. Me, 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 me. Me, me, me. Me, 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 me. Welcome, bienvenue, welcome.
I'm blue. Da, da, dee, da, da, da.
During the break, I and the live studio audience were discussing how we wished we could get a Shondaland's deal with Netflix so we can get $1 billion and only have to produce 2.5 series.
Be nice, wouldn't it?
It'd be nice.
Yeah, we'd all go to Disney and
And
go stay in the Han Solo suites.
And so far, only one of those series was good, and that was Inventing Anna, which is trash, but it's the good kind of trash that Shonda Rhimes is really good at writing. And even though she didn't write it, she outsourced it to her team. It's still that good kind of Shonda Rhimes trash. I want $1 billion to do nothing.
Dang. I love that.
Dang if I don't need some clout.
So, Doug.
Unsuccessfully derailing the topic yet again.
I watched the first episode during that break.
We watched the last one, the one we hadn't finished watching before today, before we got ready for today. And hence, that was what I was literally talking about with Tom the last minute before the sprint finished.
I feel like Doug Days helps illustrate the same point Charlie made at the very beginning of the show about The Witcher. Of if you're not sure of the story you want to create, you can instead, using the same characters, write a bunch of short stories, and you will see how they develop.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very much what we see in Doug Days, is we see how Doug and the old man develop after, and we inadvertently create a story arc of growth and character change with these characters. Even though each of these is just little self-contained short stories. You know, they're fun. Truly, what is this squirrel meant to represent? Is it that one overly dramatic friend we all end up with that we can't get rid of?
That squirrel trying to unalive itself in Doug's mouth? Like,
yes.
Tom just lost it. Like, it's just so millennial relatable. Just, that's it. My nuts are gone. Just, like, throwing itself into Doug's mouth and trying to close his mouth on him.
That part was great.
Yes, very relatable. Yes, fun pain and fun.
Puppy teeth are very sharp. Ow.
Ow, 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 and fun, but ow. But, like, one of the things I liked about the Doug Days 5 short series is it's an anthology, but even within an anthology, you actually really see examples of Doug's character growing and developing. You see by the last one that he really has grown from who he was during Up. And yet, like, this is his happily ever after. He's still growing. I hate it when they, like, oh, there's a happily ever after, and the characters never grew any further. Like, oh. As if somehow finally having nice, content, quiet life without, you know, monsters and murder. And like, oh, well, they never grew again. They didn't grow anymore. They're just the same people they were when we left them 25 years ago, as if somehow that's how people are when, y'all, if somebody doesn't grow as a person in 25 years, they have mental problems that they frankly need to see a professional about.
But one of them's the Minister of Magic now. Sorry, I couldn't help
I
myself.
stand by what I said.
Sorry, I tried not to say
I
it.
totally stand by it.
I mean, anyone who
See a
ever
therapist.
people who say that they wish they could go back to high school and just live in high school, not make different choices. Like I understand that one of the if I knew now what I knew then.
Yeah.
That's a different one than the I miss high school. You peaked in high school, which means you stopped emotionally growing. Like that's really that we will talk more about when we talk about Cyrano.
I feel like
Oh yeah, we have a lot to say about Cyrano de Bergerac.
But I feel like this is what a lot of people don't understand when it comes to messy characters or the idea of a gray character or anything like that. In that, the idea is, to me, is a gray character is a character that's unfinished. Like they have not finished their arc. They have not gotten to a place of perfection because there is no place of perfection. And so they have open-ended stories at the end, and throughout the whole thing, you see them struggling with whatever the demons are that they're struggling with.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're writing in my experience, and again, I read a lot of like fantasy and sci-fi because those are my favorite genres.
Yeah.
This is where these stories always fall apart is they have this idea of ultimate perpetual perfection that can be achieved. And okay, in a fantasy world, maybe maybe we can grant this, but it does take believability out of the characters. Like the characters are always going to need to grow and develop and change. And when you're working towards a goal, either to have them be so morally gray that by the end you don't know if they're going to be the hero or the villain, or they will finally be redeemed and be the paragon of all perfections. There, you can see where that story is going very, very early on, and there's no surprises. A good messy character is one where you're not sure where they're going to end up because of a character flaw that makes you wonder how they're going to handle the situation. And in stories like this, like I don't know how to say this. The idea that the main story is over, the big adventure story is over, what happens next? Well, life happens next. Life continues after that. I think the easiest way to say what I'm trying to say is there's nothing more boring at the end of a book than when you realize these characters are never going to do anything ever again.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is it. They're done. And it's one thing if, like, everybody dies at the end. Okay, fine. But that's an exception to the rule. And especially if everyone dies at the end and you have a series that has ghosts, like, I want the sequel of, like, what's their afterlife like now?
I was going to say, Dragon Ball has proven that just because you're dead doesn't mean you stop growing.
True.
How many power-ups?
Dead.
How many power-ups has Goku gotten after being dead?
Or even like both the UK and the American series Ghost?
Yep.
Or Ghosted?
Plural
Ghosts.
Ghosts. Of like, yes, it is possible, like you can have ghosts that slowly make inroads and the trauma that they hadn't dealt with when they were alive. And why didn't they deal with it? Well, because it was big trauma. And because often they had things to distract them from dealing with it when they were alive. But those things are all now gone, and they can actually deal with these now. Surely, in theory, maybe. We'll see. At least by the time the shows are canceled.
Well, what makes the story feel alive is when you can imagine that the characters are doing things when you're not watching them.
Yes.
Like that's the true secret to making your characters feel alive, is that you feel that they have a life beyond just the page or whatever. Mm-hmm. And you can really see this with which series get a very vibrant fan fiction community around them, because people are imagining those stories of what they're doing, or putting them in other scenarios outside. But
I mean, really look at all Star Trek.
Yeah.
And Babylon 5. and a lot of those sci-fi ones where just you hear and see so much fan fiction.
Mm-hmm.
And Star Trek's a really good example of this, because this is the difference between the reboot era and all of the series that came before it. I can't imagine Michael Burnham doing anything if it's not, I'm going to die if I don't get this done because the entire galaxy is going to explode. Like, I can't imagine. Just let's take a simple thing. What would Michael Burnham have for breakfast? I can't. She has no life for me outside of that show.
Is it not a ration? Is it not some sort of military ration?
I mean, it would have to be, because she's got stuff to do, galaxies to save.
Oh no.
Versus, we have literally seen in Strange New Worlds what Pike does during downtime.
One of my favorite fanfics when I was a kid, when in fact fanfic was hard to find because you had to find people that sold it in dark alleys. Not
You
much.
weren't sure if you're going to get a fanfic or a stabbing.
It was a story that was simply called, I think it was called Spot Time, and it was just Data and Spot playing. The entire story was a robot trying to figure out how to play with a cat, and like how to hold the yarn. Why am I holding the yarn like this? Why do you like the feather on the rope? I don't. It was so cute, and it was so precious, and it was such a wonderful slice of life story that I'm kind of surprised more of that didn't appear on the TV show, because yes, that Data was playing with the Spot and trying to figure out, like, what kind of toys do you like and all of this. There's a life outside that those characters have that make them feel so much more real, that the new, like, especially the Discovery characters, I can't imagine them doing anything outside the plot of that show, and it makes them feel so small. Like, you go to Lower Decks, I can imagine them in every situation imaginable. They are.
Oh, I love when they're playing tabletop role playing.
Yeah.
And I love that, but also I want to point out, like, okay, because I'm a Voyager girl. Janeway and her absolute addiction to chocolate and coffee, like, where she is like, wait, there's chocolate on another planet on the other side of the quadrant. Well, we need to get there, right? On the way, right? On the way, yeah. And they're like going to change course because some Ferengis, in theory, have chocolate somewhere. Like, if you had a fan fiction of that, I would absolutely believe it, of this character, and I would totally read it. And yes, I would probably give somebody a couple bucks.
I don't know if I still have it or not, but if I can find it, I'll send it to you. I had a fan novel that was called Janeway's Perfect Voyage, and it was just Janeway getting to live out that holodeck program where she's the governess for the kids and actually getting to play through the story. Like, she actually got to play through the story. Nothing interrupted her. She got to go through the entire plot.
I had, like, seriously, I cannot tell you how often, especially when Tom introduced me to Voyager and I was watching it, that I was just like, I would literally lay in bed before I fell asleep thinking about, this woman wants to play a governess. I, who had worked as a governess, going, a Victorian governess? Why? When you could have anything in a holodeck? That. Also because I have lots of opinions about that particular novel. So, or at least the novel that it's in theory based on. Like, it's just like, why, Lord? Also, Heathcliff could go to hell. I have opinions.
Surely.
But
if you were like, no, but I have this, like, I will still absolutely read it, even though I definitely am like, Janeway, Catherine, you could do better. Let's write you a good holodeck novel. Like, but that's what's so fun about these characters. And my female main character in, I don't know what the...
Relic of Time War.
Thank you. Have a meltdown about there being no coffee or chocolate on any other worlds. And then she only found 4 places on the entirety of dozens of worlds that had the proper climate soil. Yes, Anne McCaffrey made a point of coffee not being on other planets and the settlers having to drink other things. Like, is space exploration worth it? Without coffee and chocolate? I think not. Controversial hot takes.
I don't know. I've made Anne's recipe for what claw should taste like, and it's a worthy substitute. It's like coffee cocoa and a little bit of honey, and yum.
I feel like, Charlie, you're just my mother trying to sell carob to me again, and no. I'm not buying it. It's not the same as chocolate, and there's nothing you can do to try to fancy this crap up. It is not chocolate. When I eat it, it doesn't taste like chocolate. It just tastes like dark. It's like, would you like dark with a little bit of sugar? We're going to undersugar this. And no, it's not the same. So stop trying to sell me carob and swear it's chocolate. No, baby, it's not. It's a bean. It's no. It's a freaking legume. It's like going, but don't you love red beans? You love red. It's a bean. And you adding sugar does not make it better like chocolate and coffee. Ma'am. Rooibos tea is not tea. Don't sell me. I love rooibos tea, but it's not tea. If you like, would you like a nice glass of hot tea and then you give me rooibos? No.
We don't use words like tincture as much as we should. We just call everything a tea.
Right?
I mean, rooibos is it might be considered a bit of a substitute for like hibiscus.
Sure, absolutely. Definitely you can substitute hibiscus and rooibos interchangeably. And rooibos tea is not so bad as an iced tea, but it is not Lipton. Okay.
You say Lipton, I immediately think chicken noodle soup.
Sweetie, your Southern is showing.
Oh, that's because tastemaker. I have opinions. Like, I really felt Arthur Dent in the whole going all over the universe and not being able to find a decent cup of tea. Like, I felt that. Like, I felt like the entire Hitchhiker's Guide series was definitely stay home. The food and drink are better.
You're not wrong. I can definitely see that as an interpretation.
Like, that is the ultimate takeaway I took from it, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And the funny thing is, I can hear that in the writer's voice saying it.
Stay home. The tea and the sandwiches are better. Like, yes, okay. I will stay home and write instead of like space travel. Okay.
Yeah, you got to find the cucumbers.
Seriously.
I feel like it's a commentary on how rough it is as a woman, though, that Trillian didn't mind traveling.
Yes. Because, and she puts it like, I mean, like, actually, I think in either the fourth or the fifth novel, there is a discussion of that, and he asks her, didn't you miss Earth? And she's like, I didn't really miss the sexism. I didn't miss, like, being a scientist at the top of my field and still being discounted by all my male peers, as well as the general public. I did not miss that. So, yes, it sucks that the food and the drink is not as good, but I didn't have to deal with all of that, so that's cool. And since the rest of the universe doesn't really know humans very well, I didn't even really have to deal with prejudice against humans. So, yeah, it worked out. And she said, I believe it, I don't remember if it made the novel or if it's actually in the extras that I had hunted down on the internet when the internet was young and fresh, of where she said, and also the few other aliens I met who knew you would be like, oh, are you like Arthur? And I'd be like, oh no, he's weird. Even on Earth, no, everybody's like me and I'm wonderful. And they're like, oh, okay, that's fine then. And she said, that's how I dealt with all of the prejudice against humans, because I just like blamed you. And it totally worked. And I was like, I felt that so deep. So.
I'm sorry, I got distracted when my brain went, ooh, there's a podcast idea for you and Tom to do. When the internet was fresh and new, the Babylon 5 chat forums.
Oh, gosh.
Because I know both of us were on them. And so was Joe Straczynski. And
I
everyone
mean,
had opinions.
yeah, like how young and fresh was the internet? We actually were on the prototype after, was it DARPANet? DARPA? After DARPA, when they were just starting to open it up, because we were two kids who had access to the computer labs at Ole Miss, and Ole Miss was on DARPANet when they were opening it up, so you didn't have to have military clearance to access it. We were on that, y'all. That was what we were on. We were on so long ago. And why? How were we able to? I, who was 13, and Tom, who was 10. Because it turns out Asian foreign exchange students can't tell the age of white people. So they thought we were college students. Yes, they thought Tom at 10 was a college student. He was just short. You know, like other fellow Asians. It was fantastic.
These days, they don't understand how good they have it. Back in our day, you had to have separate kinds of software to do different kinds of websites because that hadn't been standardized yet.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, God.
Oh, the trauma that just got reawakened in Tom.
Will the web browser work with Lycos?
Oh, yeah.
Or did Lycos update something and it is now broken? That's what I remember, was when Lycos was the experimental web browser search engine.
Yeah.
And just periodically, some update would come through and the server just wouldn't work with a lot of web browsers.
Yep.
You know, it was a good game.
And it would take everybody about a month to update their websites, to update their code or whatever needed to be done. Yep. So anyway, my point about Doug Days, that's my point, is you can write short stories as you figure out your characters and everything, and you can even string them together, and you can just call it that, an anthology novel.
Or just call it a novel. I mean, think about how many literary classics are that. They're short stories that are just strung together, and they have enough of a through line that if you squint hard enough, it's a novel.
Yep.
I mean, I was just watching, what was it, Toy Galaxy or whatever they're now called on YouTube? I can't remember. Just released one on Babylon 5, which is what reminded me.
Mm-hmm.
And they're talking about how Straczynski wrote, like 85 or 90 of the 100 plus episodes of Babylon 5, but DC Fontana, Neil Gaiman, a bunch of others came through and wrote episodes.
Mm-hmm.
And the way they did that was, it was always each episode had to stand on its own. You were not required to have watched any other episode to enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
But each time a writer came in, they were given here's the elements that have to change for these characters in this episode. And it's like, 2 or 3 things. And the rest is up to them to write whatever story they want on a, on a starbase.
Neil Gaiman,
you can write whatever you want there.
Neil Gaiman's Day of the Dead episode of Babylon 5 is so good.
But like, the reason he could have these guest writers come through is he knew what he wanted to happen after 5 years. And so he knew how the little changes need to happen throughout. And it's not that much. And other than that, you just need an entertaining story for that hour.
And that's a skill that I feel like a lot of people are missing in the streaming era, where you get it and you can just zoom through, or you can just get the book and read it all the way through. And I think that's one of the reasons why fiction podcasts have picked up so much in recent years, because people are, one, being extremely experimental with how they're telling their stories and how they're putting them together. But also, they're having to start crafting stories again that if episode 215 is the first episode that you encounter, it has to be good on its own so that you want to go back and binge the rest of it. And that's a whole talent in and of itself that kind of started going away a little bit, but is starting to come back.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's very much what I think of as here's a combination most people, unless you're a certain age, would ever hear together in the same sentence. Prairie Home Companion and Night Vale style.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, even Old Gods of Appalachia, there is a through line through that story
Yes.
that if you listen to it in the order it came out, you see the through line in there. You can pick up any individual episode in there, though, and it's a horror story.
I would like to point out, just because we're here discussing Night Vale and that type, and also Prairie Home Companion, the way I inadvertently accidentally stumbled across how to write Welcome to Night Vale. Here's it. You write a conversation between two characters explaining a wild situation, a wild event that one person experienced, the other person is being told about. And so what's going to happen is the other person, the person who did not experience the event, will have questions like, well, then what happened? Or, well, what about this? They'll have, normal conversation. In order to write like Welcome to Night Vale, you write this this conversation, this ping pong back and forth, and then you remove all of the other person it didn't happen to. Everything they said. And that is literally how Welcome to Night Vale is.
Mm-hmm.
So if anybody is wanting to do that style, hey, look, there you go. Try that technique. It's the same with Prairie Home Companion. The Prairie Home Companion is essentially, though, both sides of the conversation. If you delete one side of the conversation, there you go. That is how you do it scary or weird or surreal versus how you do it homey, if you will.
And it really fits into what you're talking about serialized stories. I mean, there are some of the, especially the Prairie Home Companion stories, have been going on for decades.
Oh yeah, how about the two cowboys?
Yeah.
Oh, Champagne. The first time I heard that as a kid, I didn't know what Champagne was, and I asked Mom, and she said, "Go spell it out, and you'll figure it out." But now I know how to spell champagne correctly every time. So, true story. Hi, did you know I was dyslexic? Anyway, so, but again, the story of cowboys on the lonesome trail with Dusty, and I can't remember the other one's name. One of them was a horse. I don't remember now. I used to think one of them was a horse. I swear to you, in the 90s, I think they changed it to a human because people just could not relate to a talking horse. But I swear to you, one of them was a horse.
So a horse is a horse, of course.
Look, at least in my headcanon, he's a horse. Okay. But yeah, like these serialized, you don't have to connect everything. You can just come in at the good part.
Just tell the highlight reel.
Yes, just the episode of this story, right? And you don't have to say the rest of the part where, they got up every morning and they worked out and, they called their mother.
And they brushed their teeth.
Who cares? Don't tell me that. I am aware. I am sure that they have good dental hygiene, or else someone would mention their bad breath.
I would say you only need to mention they brush their teeth when one of them comments to the other. So I know you brush your teeth, but you don't seem to have a toothbrush. What is it you are brushing with? It seems like it's a stick. Well, yes, but it's a special stick from back home.
I chew on a stick. I'm so gnarly.
And does that work for a brush? Well, yes, you got to jam it in there just right, though.
Oh, like splinters.
But if that's not the case, no, don't tell us about brushing their teeth. Again, what's the highlights? What is one person curious about the other?
The toothbrushing is polishing their one golden tooth.
He ate an apple. You don't have to describe the apple unless the apple is somehow uniquely different. Like it's a purple apple that glows in the dark. Describe that.
Or why is it when every time you eat an apple, you look like you're eating the last apple on Earth?
It seems like an orgasmic experience. Tell me about it.
What's going on?
The 1997 winner for worst description in a literary story from the Bulwer Lytton Society went to the description of someone eating a peach. And it was so overwrought about the orangeness of the flesh and the velvetiness of the skin. And then it got into like the feeling of the teeth grating against the pit. Like it went into so much unnecessary detail. And I think about that every time I'm reading.
Was
Especially-
it written by an asexual? Don't use teeth.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
Don't
How,
use
how do you,
teeth.
Glory, Glory,
It's
how do you get an asexual to come out of the closet? Write an
Okay.
over detailed description of eating garlic toast. And see who's like, this is me. I want to be the garlic toast. And it's like, ace much?
I wrote a story about somebody eating an apple. It's called Apple Teeth.
But the reason I'm bringing it up is every time I read, especially this is a big sin in sci-fi, where you could have just
Okay.
said mango. Just say it's a mango. You've described a mango. Sure, it's purple. It's a purple mango. Just call it a purple mango. It's fine. It's a purple Vulcan mango. I don't care. Whatever the name of the alien species is. You just gave me 9.5 paragraphs to describe a mango. I know it's your weird alien fruit, but you couldn't think of an alien fruit, so you described a mango. And this is a big problem in the genre. It happens way too much.
No one needs to describe that much. It was sweet. It tasted good, and then you mentioned whether you slurp or crunch it. That's it. We're done. We're done. We're done with the fruit description. We move on.
Do you want me to read my apple story to you?
Oh, okay. Yes, if you want to, go for it.
Okay.
Wait, are we allowed to read you for filth if that feels appropriate afterwards?
Yes.
Okay.
It is called Apple Teeth. The candy apple glistens in the purple fairy lights. Gooey caramel reflects the festive colors, promising wonder and delight inside. Sweetness radiates from the confection, wrapping your mind in memories of childhood. Simpler times when all seemed good. You put the Halloween treat to your mouth and sink your teeth in. Through the sugary exterior and hidden green skin they pierce. You expect the crisp interior of apple, tart and good. It tastes black, of rotten death. It bites back, decaying your teeth instantly. A row of bleeding, once pearly whites remain in the caramel when you pull back. That's all.
And Gloria's going to have nightmares for weeks. I saw that look on your face.
So bad. Oh, it's so gross. Oh,
I mean, that is truly high concept.
yes. When the candy bites back.
It was a mimic all along.
It was a mimic!
The chaos demon in the background is chanting. It's 99 cents at your local Kroger's downtown.
I mean, but how many people have not felt betrayed by, you know, some fruit that they ate, and it's like, oh, now I got to go to the dentist.
Like those nectarines that we had that tasted like plums.
Yeah.
That's weird.
You chew like straight styrofoam.
What are those
Yeah.
apples that are
They
just
did feel like
fluff inside?
styrofoam.
What? What'd you say, Laura?
What are those apple fruits that are actually just fluff inside?
What?
You just said this in front of 2 research librarians. You better have an answer.
Apples that are
Where
fluff
the-
inside?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's in Isaiah or something. Something about fruit and crap. What is it?
Apples that are fluff inside.
I feel like Laura is covering the spread between 2 research reference librarians and then 2 religious scholars. Like, what are you like?
My brain just was like, so it's like an
Although-
apple that you bite into and it's like cotton candy?
Okay, so, but here's the thing you always have to remember about anything biblical. In English, whenever someone says apple, what they just mean is fruit.
Yeah.
They just translated everything that was fruit to apple
Well,
in the
in
Bible.
Yeah.
Old English, apple used to just mean fruit. Back in the olden days. I mean,
Hair?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dirt apples. Thanks.
I'm so curious now what this is. I have so many questions. You know, I have a paper to write this week. I don't have time to do theological explanation.
I'm literally pulling up, doing search for Isaiah and fruit. The fruit that righteousness will be. Like, I'm having trouble pulling up references to fruit in Isaiah.
I don't know if it was Isaiah. It was somewhere in the Old Testament? New Testament? I don't remember.
Okay, like, you can't, no, look, you can't go, oh, is it Old Testament or New? It could be either. Like, yeah, that's called the whole thing.
I know.
You've not narrowed this down like you think you have.
I say this is somebody who spoke a little bit too much Hebrew and Farsi over the weekend. Yeah. I was asked to give a presentation, and I did.
I'm even just Bible and fruit fluff. I'm not pulling up anything.
Okay, here's my $1 million idea. We're gonna start selling fruit snacks, and they're gonna call it biblical fruit fluff. I think we can make millions.
It's like fluffy seeds inside.
That one's probably referencing pomegranates.
Could be pomegranates. And baobab fruit also has that texture. You can hear Roy in the background going, "Mommy, what have you done?"
Exactly.
Mommy, did you break the internet again?
Because I was pulling up, and as far as the Old Testament, there's only 6 fruits referenced.
Yeah.
They are grapes, figs, olives, pomegranates, dates, and apples.
By the way, aren't peacherines actually nectarines? Isn't that peach and a tangerine crossed together make a nectarine?
I believe they recrossed peaches and nectarines to try to make a thing.
God, it's just gotten weirder. Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, don't worry because
whoa. Have you ever seen an Australian finger lime?
Yes.
You're making me not want to look at
It
that.
looks like boba pearls inside.
Yeah, no, that's the correct response, Glory.
Same. When Laura gets excited, I know to like pull back on the enthusiasm for a moment.
What? They're just like the calf's foot of the plant world. They're fine.
So anyway, Doug Days. I know how to herd ADHDers. Tom, stop researching nonsense in the Bible.
Isaiah does reference cucumber.
Focus!
I've lost my marbles.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, I feel like Doug Days also brings up, because that's why Glory wanted to use Doug Days, that people often forget about, is short stories is a way of bridging full-length story arcs with short story time frame. Of like, you can tell a giant, Tolkien-esque story in drabbles.
So also, okay. So there is, how do I say this? Writers have a tendency, particularly newer, but I would go with all writers, even the more seasoned writers. I've heard this from feedback of writers have a tendency to focus on the epic stories, the epic events, and forget to write about the small hours. So what are small hours? They are the little moments that illustrate the place, the characters, the times that they live in.
Thankfully, there's an audience to help Charlie in case they, stop breathing for a moment.
It might be helpful.
That's why there's.
So, but again, like a lot of writers feel like they need to either move the story forward, move the plot forward, and, discuss the giant robot in the room, or, next to the ship that wants to eat the ship or whatever. I don't know. And they don't also write the occasional scene that illustrates the small hours, like that of the crew eating dinner, and some people have feedback for Cookie. I hate it when you put carrots in the stew. Well, deal with it. Just pick out the carrots. You will survive.
Yeah, like having, giant space deities of good and light and darkness fighting each other, and taking a moment to empathize with the addiction that one Mr. Garibaldi had to wrestle with. Makes it very personal. It works, though.
I can't remember what I was watching. It was, I think, a movie with Jason Statham in it, but I can't actually be sure. If it was, it probably was that.
Was it Crank 2?
Yeah, it
High
Voltage?
Voltage?
I wanted to call it Transport, but you're right. It was Crank. Probably was Crank, but I can't remember, so don't quote me. But essentially, so imagine the two people, they're fighting, and they have to move, right? Maybe there's a truck coming. They gotta get out of the way, right? And then, because essentially this fight is traveling, there is a certain moment where they're both just sitting there catching their breath, and maybe one of them may be eating or smoking a cigarette. And then okay, you ready? Yeah, okay. And they go back to fighting. That is what I'm talking about the small hours. There are these little moments that actually tell us a lot. And it can be easier to practice this as writing it as a short story, such as, again, Doug Days, where it's all Doug Days. All these shorts are about small hours, the little things. It's mostly Doug in his backyard, and occasionally with the old man, Papa, as Doug then names him. And what they're doing or not doing, or they're just being there. They're just being themselves together and apart, just living their lives, doing their things. It's the wee small hours, but it tells us so much about these people, because this is when these people are not out in the world being public. This is when they're home, what they are like. And everybody, hopefully, is their true self when they are home by themselves, or just with their family, or whoever they choose to live with. Presumably, people are their true selves when they are just out there and home in their living room or their backyard being themselves.
I mean, there is a great scene in, I think, the second episode where Doug is trying to track down a strange smell. And we see Doug pass by a 4th of July picnic, and there is a thing of hot dogs.
The whole stack of grilled dogs.
And, and he's like, where's the smell as well? But hot dogs. He's like, I know I'm not supposed to have food I am not given. If only someone would give me food. And then he snatches one and then continues on.
He goes back to try to figure out this.
And then when he finds out the smell and he realizes it's an emergency, he runs back to Papa, but on the way, let me grab another one.
He's a dog, right?
And these moments, though, tell you about the impulse control problems Doug has as a dog, the, attention span, what he's capable and what he's not capable of. He's only got so much self-control.
Mm-hmm.
But we understand his character better through these little interactions.
That he tries. He knows right and wrong. He tries so hard, but you know what? Hot dog. He tries to be a good boy. Hot dog. But but the trying is what we find charming and endearing about Doug.
Or even in that first one, when the squirrel goes full over dramatics and just places itself in Doug's mouth.
It closes the lid.
And Doug is having a conflict of emotions.
Should I unalive the squirrel? I want to.
I would be happy if the squirrel was gone, but not like this. But Squirrel is now sad. I don't want to make Squirrel also sad.
Yes.
I know I talk about Star Trek way too much, but is me.
Go on.
You can really see the difference in these kinds of scenes, in the difference between two scenes, one from Picard season 2 and one from Picard season 3. In season 2, we see Jean-Luc sit down with Guinan at a bar, and their entire conversation is plot driven. There is nothing personal. There is no interpersonal relationships between them. We learn absolutely nothing except for what beat will get us to the next point in the story. You're kind of even wondering why you had the layover at the bar. What is the point of this? Could they not have just met on the street on the way to the place? Because you're already running as fast as you can to it. The location doesn't matter. Nothing about the scene matters. But in season 3, we open on a scene with Picard and Riker at a bar. And they're just talking about their life and the way things have been and what's going on. And they're just catching up. They're just two friends catching up. Haven't seen each other for a while. Things have been kind of crazy, time travel, Q and all. And they're just sitting around, just talking. And that it instantly made Picard season 3 feel so much more lived in, and like we were seeing actual characters and not just avatars for plot. And they actually did this a couple times in season 3 so far, which I am surprisingly have been enjoying, considering how much I did not like the previous 2 seasons. Because they're taking this time to just sit down and stop. And there are comparable scenes in this show to scenes that were in previous ones. But in the previous ones, they were always 100% plot. They didn't give you a space. They didn't tell you anything about the characters. There's a dinner scene in season 3 where Seven, Picard, Riker, and Captain Shaw are having dinner together. And it is one of the most tense dinner scenes that tells you everything about everyone's character in very short order. And it works. It makes you feel like these characters, like, oh yeah, okay, so he's a jerk and she's really trying not to snap him in half, which you can probably do with her Borg strength. And like nobody is happy that any of this is going on. It works really, really well, as opposed to, again, in previous seasons, we saw scenes of them sitting around and eating, and it was all 100% plot 100% of the time, and there was no breath in it at all.
Yeah, it sounds like they kind of learned from both Lower Decks and Strange New Worlds of the core audience of Star Trek will always be people who just want to imagine what this world would be like, this future. And so they want to just be there and experience it. And the way they do that is through these characters. We want some high plots to, drive us along, to have a fun story and time. But what's the point of a roller coaster that goes up and down at different speeds if there's not something interesting to see along the way?
Right. It's the wasted wee hours, like in season 1, where we see Picard out in the vineyard tending the vines. This could have been a really interesting moment of this man who was go his entire life is now a farmer. Like there's so much to dig into.
He's doing the thing that he said he would never do when his father was alive. Why are they not even acknowledging, like, wow, if your father could see you now?
Let alone we don't get that much. We given the amount of importance and emotional weight of it, we get so little real small hour moments between Picard and the 2 Romulans that live with him.
Yes.
And their relationship feels empty and hollow. It's those small moments. Like the reason season 3 works is because it gets to steal the relationships that we developed on TNG with Beverly's back and Worf's back and all of these characters that we have seen them have a relationship with. And it doesn't, and it's those little moments that gave us that sense that they were real characters, that they were living in the world. And anytime you're not giving it that breath, you just can't have that.
So what I am trying to get at is, and just in my personal opinion, as a voracious reader, or really a former voracious reader, because I don't really like most books that have been published since the late 2000s. Like, as much as I miss reading new published stuff, but it's not good. And one of the things I don't like, even though, as y'all know, I talk about like, oh, I hate it when stories waffle on. And I still maintain that. But there's not enough of the small hours in most novels so that I can get acquainted with the characters as well as the world. And when we're talking about high fantasy, I love a good market scene. And not like where the plot is moving forward. I don't want the plot to move forward. I want to see, how do you barter? How do you bargain? What do you buy? Tell me about it. Are they going to talk about how to prepare the food? I want to hear. Even though half the time I am like misunderstanding the nature of these fruits and vegetables. And in my head, I'm totally wrong in what it looks like because neurodivergent much. I don't care. I don't care that I got it wrong and I maybe like misremembered or misread the color of the fruit or something. I don't care. I want this interaction. I want the small hours. You know, there goes the baker with this tray like always.
It's like
Okay, so I feel like
to sell, bitches. So,
I feel that like the point Glory's trying to get to it, but I think you missed that little segue part.
Please go on.
Is the difference between waffling and small hours is that small hours gives you time to lower your emotions in the story for the roller coaster of emotions to function.
Yes.
Versus Picard season 1 and 2, it's always at full speed. We never get breaks.
Yeah, it's a bit intense.
Yes.
Like
versus waffling is where we've spent an entire 2 episodes with filler. What was the point of this? Why are we still here? I'm bored.
Filler that does not even properly show me what the world is like, what the interactions between the various people and how they know each other or why they know each other or their dynamics, their relationship dynamic. They don't show me any of that. It's just, what are we doing? I am bored as hell. Versus if I'm getting to know characters and their relationship dynamics, that's not necessarily boring to me. And I'm sorry, go on.
I was just saying, small hours, they should be satisfying in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
When you first brought this topic up, I thought about my favorite episode of Babylon 5 because Tom has been referencing Babylon 5 a lot, and that's Hour of the Wolf.
Tom's fault. Sorry, Charlie.
But that's the episode Hour of the Wolf. Mm-hmm. Nothing happens in this episode. Everyone is sitting, drinking, waiting. They know something bad is about to happen. They know that this is literally the moment before the darkest moment. Like, we're either going to win or lose. Everything's tense. And it's just the characters sitting, drinking together, commiserating. But it doesn't feel like a filler episode. Like, oh, we don't have enough episodes to get to the big finale, so let's throw in an episode in the middle. It's meaningful. We get to meet the characters, see where they are, see that even these big brash heroes that are going out and fighting and saving the day are worried. Like, even Ivanova gets a wonderful moment. Like, she's always so cocksure of herself through the entire series. And we see her at this intensely vulnerable moment where she actually gives the speech from that the name of the episode is taken from. Every night when you know the darkness is coming, you pour out three shots and leave them at the door, 1 for the wolf and 2 in case she has cubs. And it's that wonderful moment where you see who she is and why she deserves to be in charge because she's worried about these people. She's not just Zap Brannigan people out to die in wave after wave against their enemies, right? She has concern, she has feelings, and you get this rare moment of vulnerability that is satisfying in a completely different way from the action, adventure, and the plot. Because the plot is literally on pause. We don't know what's like. We're in the in-between between two major plot beats, but it's satisfying, and that's what a good small hours needs to be.
Another
I have
that is actually in Andor. When they go to do the heist, they could have just dropped off of the planet, prepped for the heist, and shown the heist. But they took an episode in between or small hours, basically.
Yeah.
Is the comment where when they're going there to build, they used it to build extra tension for the heist itself to help you understand the characters more, so that when a bunch of them end up dying, you don't go, oh, they're just random. This is guy 3, 4, and 5. We're all going to be shot and killed and mean nothing. Like their deaths actually have more of a meaning and impact. And
you start asking, like the rest of us in the next episode, did Cinda eat the baby?
Yeah, and also because they could have just had them walking, but if they had them just walking, that would have been boring. That wouldn't have been small hours either. That would have been like just wasted filler. If it's like, oh, they're hiking slowly through the mountains.
Because the episode basically takes place at the various camps along the way as they're going to the place where the heist is going to be. And yeah, you get to see them worrying. Like one of my favorite lines from the entire series is in that episode where the true believer is like, I don't understand. I have faith in the cause. I believe that we're going to win and I can't sleep. You believe in nothing and you sleep like a stone. And there's this really interesting conversation with them about the power of belief and nerves, and that makes everything literally in the entire series after that matter in a way that it wouldn't have without this quiet moment of them sitting around a campfire just talking.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's a lot of actually what brought people and created such a diehard fandom for Firefly. Was we saw so much of their downtime.
Mm-hmm.
And we felt for them and how they were experiencing this life. And we didn't want even them to have to experience some of it.
And why the movie feels so weird from the get-go, because it has none of that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, like, again, the Bridget Jones Diary, the book, had plenty of small hours in there. There's a lot of conversations she has with a lot of people that she writes about in her diary, and frankly, these conversations don't go anywhere. She has conversations with coworkers. She has conversations with her friends. She has conversations with random people in the original book, and they don't go anywhere. But they really tell us about Bridget. They tell us about her world. They tell us about the times and the social expectations. So that, like, for instance, in Bridget Jones, in the book, when Perpetua totally tells off Daniel, we understand why. It's not out of character for her to just be, I have had enough with his nonsense. He is treating you overly familiar, unacceptable. And we get it. We get why. And Bridget's like, oh, yeah, I guess I should stand up for myself. Because Perpetua is only a couple years older than her. Well, a little more than a couple years. But she's like, this is unprofessional. This is not okay. Even though Perpetua doesn't know, like, oh, the terrible flirty. Perpetua's seen a little flirt. She hasn't seen the emails, the very inappropriate emails. And so it makes sense. Same in Hunger Games. I can't remember if it was the second it was the third book, I think, where Katniss ends up in that underground city. What was it, in the 13th section?
Yeah,
13th district.
Yeah, like in their underground city. There's a couple scenes actually in there. Technically, they're small hour scenes. They don't necessarily move the plot forward, but they really show, like, Katniss, who is very much a nature girl, cannot handle this as much as she absolutely wants security. And the 13th district is definitely trying to sell her on security. She cannot stand being this deep underground and also having her life so closely regimented. She needs a little bit of chaos, and she needs some nature. And these are two things that she absolutely cannot get in the 13th district. So we understand her better, even though it's near the end of the book. Like, truly, this is right. I think it opens. The third book opens with her in the 13th district, and they're really trying to sell her on it and trying to only show the good stuff. But eventually she starts seeing, like, some things that maybe she has some questions about. And overall, the experience kind of girds her loins to really do her final overthrow of Snow, because she doesn't want to. She's freaking tired. And she genuinely doesn't believe she'll survive it because heroes are always sacrificed. And she doesn't want to be the hero because she wants her own life. She really wants to live. But she sees like she's running out of options, and now she's down to 2 options. It's fight Snow, overthrow Snow, or live in the 13th district and have her entire rest of her life run and her be used almost like a breeding stock. And she has to make a decision. But we actually see, we get intimately familiar with her motivation only through the small hours. And that's because of character development. Let us stop underselling the small hours.
Yeah, because one other great example, I think, of where they failed on the small hours is the new Dune. It's like they didn't really have any of it in it. And not only that, but they also, I guess, ignored it from the books and changed the meaning of a lot of that stuff. But
you're just trying to trigger me now.
I'm not trying to trigger you, but if you think about it, because Dune was so full of wonderful small hours.
It was, and the book
and
was.
The original movie and the TV series, miniseries of Dune, included those in, and it made them so much better. Even though, like, there's a lot of issues you can have with the Cronenberg one, it was a lot better because it at least had those small hours. The story was so much.
You don't understand
so
what the relationship between Paul and Jessica is, or Paul
Yeah.
and Leto.
Yeah.
And yeah, because the small hours is really where you generate a lot of those interpersonal relationships and deepen them. It's one of the reasons why even books that don't include the smutty, dirty stuff will often have pillow talk scenes if in a romantic story, because what is this couple like when they're not out on a date, when it's just the 2 of them alone? Like, those quiet moments are so important for understanding who is this couple really. Because we all act differently in public than we do when we're at home alone, away from prying eyes. And you kind of need to have that to make a story work. I don't know why I'm wanting to yell at E.L. James right now, but I am.
Carrie says Hunger Games is so bad. One of the biggest motivations for Katniss was to keep her sister safe, and it literally blows up in her face. All that seems like it's for nothing. And to find out, that someone was supposed to be your best friend was a part of it, just added more knives in her back. So again, let us go back to valuing the small hours. So I really think, to some degree, we saw that more and more stories had fewer and fewer small hour moments in them, in particular since the 2010s. And I think that has a lot to do with the mass firing or laying off of editors at all the major book publishers. And then, of course, the buying out and closing down of most of the major book publishers. The value of having an army of qualified, competent editors on staff is to get that feedback of, hey, can we get some small hour scenes in here? Scenes where the characters are just eating together and talking about food they like, or can we get some market scenes in here? I've actually even had that feedback from professors at my university in creative writing of, Glory, how is it possible that you have written a story of like fantasy and there's no market scene? And that was literally what my professor said to me. That was literally in her note. Where is the market scene? How is it possible to have a world building with no market scene? She had a point. She had a strong, like, I was thinking about like all these fantasy novels around. I'm like, you're right, there is a market scene. She's like, Glory, where's market scene? She's like, even in a story that's in a foreign country where our main character is, foreign to that place, market scenes are wonderful for us to get to know our main character, to see how our main character interacts with this foreign world, as well as to kind of like get some flavor in there of like shops and clothing and whatever, and flirting. And I'm like, flirting? She's like, yes. Merchants are always flirting, not necessarily sexually, but they're like, hello, beautiful lady, can I interest you in fruit? Like, I'm like, is that a thing? She's like, oh, yes. And then I'll say, would you like some tea? Come sit and have tea. Talk to me. Tell me who you are. And I was like, really? And then the more I thought about it, I'm like, oh my gosh, she's right. I mean, I had lived in the Philippines and I had totally not thought about all the shop owners that are like, come, I would love to meet the new American here in town. Come have tea. And I didn't quite put it all together because I was young and an idiot. Would a weapon shop count as a market scene? I would say so.
Let's say, like,
At
so
least as long as, like, in the weapon scene, there's like nominal conversations about where's a good place to eat around here, and oh well, this weapon would be better if you're going to fight in the forest or whatever. I don't know, something.
let's say, like, oddly, the movie Double Team, I think, with Rodman and Jean-Claude Van Damme, that weapon shop actually counts as a market scene. But also to kind of bring a visual to it, because I know some people work better with visual analogies. So the purpose of the small hours is what Laura is very familiar with. It is the compositor. Whenever people complain about there's so much bad CG in the movies now, what they're complaining about is not CG, because most people do not realize the incredible,
amount of CG.
Pick your favorite curse word ton of CG that is modern movies in Hollywood.
Mm-hmm.
But the difference between good and bad is how it's composited. Hence the problem people have with I want to say, was it the first or the second Hulk movie of the 2000s, where the real problem is simply that the Hulk is too bright green.
It's the second one.
Someone actually literally just...
He's like Kermit Green.
Yeah.
Someone literally just re-edited it and
turned... swamp. What is this nonsense?
Someone literally redid scenes where all they did was turn down the green on the Hulk. That's it. Nothing else. They didn't change anything else. And all of a sudden, you could see, the lighting matches, the reflections are fine, everything is fine. It's the director wanted the Hulk to stand out like this. It wasn't even the compositor's, mistake. But that essentially the Hulk was not blending in to match these scenes in the way the light was, because the Hulk is not supposed to be luminescent.
Yeah, like what are those fish from deep in the ocean? Oh, he's come out and he's walking around going, hello, do you see my little light? Come to me, little one.
My anglerfish.
What is this?
Yes. And what the little hours does is it helps blend your characters into the world they exist in. It shows how do they exist in that world. And that is how much you need. You don't need a lot.
It makes it so that you can't just transplant them into any world.
Right. And them. So what I am trying to put forth to everybody is to practice writing small hour scenes by writing it as short stories. You could write it as drabbles. You could write it as flash fiction. You could write it as proper short stories. Like, I literally, and this is true, and one day I will share all with you, maybe in the not too distant future, like maybe this tonight in Discord, I will even read to you. I have an entire short story. It's not done. Because I don't finish crap and y'all know me. Of Dr. Mahajer meets a djinn and they have tea together. A djinn that has been stuck in a lamp or something for, I don't know, hundreds, if not thousands of years. And they talk about, their experiences as a Persian doctor and a djinn. And that's it. They're literally just having tea. And the djinn tries to, pocket some orange slices. For later.
So there's this anime manga series called Chainsaw Man. Incredibly popular. Season 1 is out. Oh my gosh. Okay. It's done by Studio Mappa. They're amazing. But it's all he literally has a chainsaw coming out of his face and his arms and tearing up all these demons. And then he's on this team with this swordsman guy who's very serious. And so they have to live together. And they start to get to know each other's quirks. And like this one guy, the main character, the chainsaw dude, has been living on like a slice of bread a day for years. Like he was indebted to the Yakuza, and like it was just a horrible life. He was literally selling off his own body parts for money to try and get out of this debt that he inherited from his dad. So he's finally eating food. And so he's like exploring his taste with all these different things on toast. And it's very endearing. And he's like, oh my gosh, a bathtub! And so like you get to know them a little bit, and they start to get into a morning routine, and it's the most beautiful animation of washing your face, making your tea, cooking your breakfast, reading on the newspaper on your balcony, and then the door flings open and enters crazy person number 3 to just throw everything in the air, refuses to flush the toilet, refuses to take a bath. She is just a piece of work, and it's just the juxtaposition of, oh my gosh, it's so beautiful, it's so calm, and then everything on its head. It's like, oh my gosh.
Roy getting that squeaky toy at just the right moment. Thank you, Roy.
Yes, he is a master of the squeaks.
He is. He knew exactly when his cue was.
Yeah, so like that moment was a great break of learning that swordsman's terrible backstory of why he's so serious. Mm-hmm. And then like, oh, he does get to enjoy life a little bit.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, he gets to read his newspaper with tea.
I mean, it kind of reminds me of, I was hearing what the inspiration for the original Street Fighter video game. And it essentially brings up a good discussion that we were talking about in narrative styles. Because the whole point of Street Fighter was the boss battles are the most fun part of the video games in the 80s. Well, why don't we just do boss battles? And that was the whole concept really for Street Fighter, was why don't we just do boss battles? Why do we have to make him go through all these, areas to just get to the fun of the boss battle challenge? Except we see that, but without that development between each boss battle, why do you care?
Yeah.
In a completely different genre from the one that Laura was talking about, I think that this is why Heartstoppers became such a phenomenon, because there are 1,000 high school kids in love stories in the world.
Oh yeah.
But Heartstopper has this wonderful ability where it stops and you spend time with each of the characters in their quiet moments and really get to know who they are, with the exception of one who was created just for the show, which hopefully we get to see more of in the next season. But you get to spend time with them and get to feel like you really know them. There are times that are just not plot oriented at all, that they're not moving forward with either the romance stories or any of the other stories that are going on, that are just them being kids having fun together. And when I've talked to other friends of mine that are really into the show, they almost always go to like that scene where they're all in the room dancing. Like it's like everyone's favorite scene. It does absolutely nothing for the story. It does absolutely nothing for the plot. But in watching how each of them moves their body when they're in this safe space where they're not being judged by the outside world and they're not judging each other, you get to know so much about who the characters are in this quiet, still moment. And the show gives each of the characters several of these throughout that really deepen your experience with it in a way that a lot of the shows, especially in this genre that show is in, it's all about the high school drama. That you're not going to have those quiet moments of just the friends being friends. There has to be, there's this lie. And I've talked about this before and I've done videos about it on the channel, that there has to be conflict in every scene or you have failed. There needs to be tension, some sort of tension in the scene to pull you forward. but tension is not conflict. And especially in these like high school drama shows, if we saw all of them in the room together just hanging out, someone would be having an argument with somebody about something, because we have to have conflict. We can't just have them sitting there. And you don't have that time to really get to know the characters when they're always bickering with each other. But getting to see them just having a moment of just fun, hanging out, just being goofballs because they're kids in high school. It makes the show feel so much more real. It helps, like that sequence that I talked about is the reason people talk about it when you bring the show up, is that's the scene where you're going to figure out which one of the kids you were in high school. Are you the one that just sat on the bed reading the book and not paying attention to all of the dancing nonsense going on? Are you the one that was doing the most crazy, outlandish, interpretive dance to everything? Right? Because you get to see their characters such a simple but clear way, and also how they interact with each other, because they do start dancing with each other. And it's not just a montage. It's just this moment of, no, they really are friends, just having friendship time together.
I think one of the best scenes that they added to the movies of Harry Potter is the dance scene in one of the Deathly Hallows movies.
Yes.
The Nick Cage and the Bad Seeds. Like,
I think the first Deathly Hallows movie.
Yeah.
It's like,
hands down.
Wow, they're actually friends.
Yeah.
It's like, what is this?
Also, you really see their personalities come through.
Awkward dance moves.
Oh, God. And the fact that, Ron won't dance with his date is like, oh, God, seriously, Hermione, please don't settle. Please don't settle. Please don't settle.
But another thing that I wanted to bring up was sometimes it could be, like you guys were talking about, a side episode that doesn't have to move the plot forward, and they're so memorable. And the one that came to my mind was Almost Got 'Em in Batman the Animated Series.
Yes.
Where it's literally the villains sitting around a table playing poker, swapping stories about the time they almost got Batman. It's like, yes, this world feels lived in.
Yes.
The bad guys don't just show up to get caught. Like, they actually have connections with each other and rivalries.
Mm-hmm.
I threw a rock.
And
yeah, I think that the writers could do with a lot more practice in this century with writing more small hour scenes or stories or just practice it. I don't care. Just practice any of it, because like, honestly, that is what, like, for instance, I find so charming about so many stories. Like, seriously, Laura has tried to get me to watch Chainsaw Man so many times, but honestly, the best pitch she's made to me so far was just now.
True.
And I'm like, oh, well, that actually sounds kind of interesting. And I'm also interested with this juxtaposition between this character and this other person, and this, how they don't flush the toilet. Who the hell is this? I am curious to watch this.
She's hilarious. Her name is literally Power.
Yes. They're being awkward and silly and just having a moment of release in the scary time. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Like, everybody loves to dance when there's a moment where they feel safe enough to just, you just kind of move your body a little bit to the beat of the music, even if you're on the sideline.
I dance with Roy.
Yes, exactly.
But let's be honest. One of the main reasons why Jane Austen is going to be perpetually remade is she was the queen of small moments.
Yes.
You feel like you know all of her characters because she gives you those moments with each one in a way that is meaningful, that sticks with us, and why those stories, like, think about it. I mean, these are literally romance novels from ages past. Like, we're so far removed from the
Nobody's
setting.
alive who was around then.
Yeah, we're so far removed from
and also, let's be honest, for the vast majority of people who read it, these people are of an income level none of us can really relate very well to.
I don't have a cook.
I don't have a cook. I don't have a livery, like, person, or like even a stable.
I don't have carriages and horses.
I don't have any of that, and I certainly don't have to worry about my marriage prospects or who's going to inherit what title from what land, whatever. And I don't have to worry about any of that. I will never have to worry about any of that. That is definitely no concern of mine. I certainly don't have to worry about late 1700s, early 1800s English tax inheritance laws. That all of these Jane Austen novels are definitely influenced. Like, seriously, I know way too much about English tax laws because of her frickin' books and my research trying to write a reader's style like that. Of like, you can't write that stuff without eventually knowing more than you wanted to about English inheritance tax laws at the time. And that is actually surprisingly the push. Like, nobody sees this monstrous machine underneath that are actually pushing almost all of Jane Austen's novels forward is the injustice of the English tax inheritance laws of the times and how they were very rapidly changing about every 8 to 12 years. I mean, it was a serious social upheaval, and that is the entire stage for the Jane Austen novels. And once you find that out, you're like, oh my God, I see it in all of her novels. It's like she's essentially making a commentary that all of us Americans and all of us who have never lived in the 1800s are completely unaware of. I mean, she was being incredibly satirical and just ripping Parliament to shreds in these novels. Let's see. Like he says, you need to watch the anime 86 for a good view of the small hour scenes. All but one of the characters is at risk of imminent death because they are fighting a war against an AI army. Ooh. You watch them doing laundry and cooking and playing games or reading or just talking between battles. Okay, that's very cool.
I say, isn't 86 a Gundam? Is Gundam 0086?
I don't know.
You're reminding me of another episode of Chainsaw Man because I have a problem.
Maybe
So
well.
There's an episode where they get trapped in a hotel on a level with like the infinite stairs. So like the going up and like you're stuck on the same level. And so the whole episode takes place in this hallway in these couple of rooms. And these characters have to come to terms with, we might die here. And so it's just them, like, main character is like, I'm going to take a nap. We'll see what happens. The other ones are like having nervous breakdowns. The other one is scheming on how she's going to become a Nobel Prize winner so that she could become like the mayor and raise the sales tax to 100%. Like, she's out there, man.
Concept. Okay.
So like, it's just, it took the time to get to know these characters, why they took this job in the first place, so we could have this talk and this threat of time is stopped here. Nobody can come in and save us. We got to save ourselves. Do we want to sacrifice somebody? Or like, how is this going to go down? And it's all just these conversations and panicking in a corner. And it's just so good. Yes.
Nice.
But I did look it up. I was wrong. The anime Maggie's talking about is just called 86.
Okay.
And
Well,
yeah, it definitely gets to the whole when society no longer considers you human and treats you as, other.
Oh, yikes.
And how do you continue existing and fighting?
I need to skedaddle so I can take Roy outside.
Okay.
So my state when the laws get passed.
Yeah. So, to wrap up, I don't know. I mostly have said the part that I thought, which is take your inspiration where you can. Creative Recharge is entirely about finding inspiration, particularly as a creative person, of just finding whatever inspires you to keep going, to keep being creative, to keep sharing your creative ideas with others. And so from that, I have positioned here of, hey, give shorts films a place to inspire you. And even if you never write short stories, still you can take a lot of inspiration from short films, from short stories like Pixar does and that Disney is also doing. And hello, little kitty baby. And But if you want to try writing short stories, you can also take inspiration from that. And at the very least, be thinking about writing small hours. Practice it. You will never get better if you don't get started. So go ahead and give it a try. And if you're not sure, how would I possibly write the small hours? The answer is you literally are living it. Give it a try. Just literally put the characters in your place that you live and have them go do the kind of things you do every day or every week, whether it's grocery shopping or eating dinner with the people that you live with, whatever it is, give it a try. See what you think. Even if you feel like you're not satisfied with what you've written at first, remember, nobody is perfect the first many times they try, that you will only get better with practice. But also think about like your characters. Your characters are living small hours, whether you're sharing it with your readers or not. But your readers, frankly, are craving small hours. There's been several stories. So, for instance, including what is it that Joss Whedon, the Firefly. The way Tom got me to watch it was one of the episodes, not the first one, like the second or third, or maybe it was the fourth one that Tom was like, just watch this one. And I think Mom was also begging me to watch it. This was when Mom was still alive. So I watched it, and it was almost entire. It was the one where they've got to like get something new for the engine, so they stop in this port.
Oh,
and the engineer, she like mostly just stays and guards the ship, which is kind of hilarious. But then it turns out she's needed. She's so cute. Oh my gosh, I love her. But it's mostly them in the market, and then them meeting people that they wish they hadn't. It's all small hours. Like for the most part, that episode is small hours. And that was how Mom and Tom got me to watch the whole freaking series. Even though they warned me ahead of time, it is ill-fated. Like, okay. Was this mostly small hours episode because there's so much world building in it. And I thought, this is kind of fun. And I feel like I know the characters well enough that I'm willing to spend several more hours with these characters. I mean, like, seriously, Mom and Tom, after I was like, oh, okay, this is actually a pretty good episode. I think I maybe start from the beginning. And then they both tried to talk me out of watching the whole series. So that's fascinating. My family's
but in another one, like, if you liked Firefly and you're like, but it was so short, and you're like, I wanted more of this. I know it's controversial, but I'm going to suggest go watch a slightly older series. Go watch, of course, now it's run out of my head.
Star Hunter?
Huh?
Star Hunter?
No. The Jim Henson Australian one.
Oh, Farscape.
Yeah.
Because Farscape had an equal amount of downtime and high concept stories.
Which again, that's how Tom got me to watch it. Was he's like, no, don't watch the first season. I think like Tom actually started me on the third season. I can't quite remember.
Second season.
Season.
But it's a full season, and each episode is an hour. So like there is so much story. Each season feels like 2 or 3 seasons.
It does. It really does. But yeah, like again, like show me the, when they're not actively fighting the robot monster giants, or whatever. Like, show me how they live their lives. Because, okay, so here's what I have to say about it. The way you become friends with a person is spending small hours together. All of us. That is how you bond a friendship. Just because you like a person doesn't mean that you two are friends until you spend those small hours together where maybe you're eating, maybe you're playing video games together or board games, or you're just chatting about your favorite comfort watches, whatever it is, or maybe you're just literally doing like what I used to do, which is you're sitting at the dog park watching your dog, and this lady keeps coming up and sitting down next to you and just talking to you like she knows you. And you're like, well, the weird lady, but that's fine. And there's her dog. It's some sort of like Chihuahua Terrier mix thing. Playing with my dog, no problem. And it's not till literally years later that I realized this woman was so sick with meningitis that I no longer recognized her. And I had known her from years before as a friend. but she never like said, "Hey, Glory, remember me from way back?" She just jumped into conversations with me because she recognized me and I no longer recognized her because she'd changed so much from being deathly ill for so long. But she essentially just started sitting next to me at the bench in the dog park for like every day or nearly every day for almost a year. And when we essentially restarted our friendship, even though I thought we were just starting from scratch, and we just chatted about nothing, y'all. We chatted about nothing. We chatted about dogs. We chatted about dog gossip. Oh, there was dog gossip. There was a dog called Scout, and then there was another dog called Bad Scout, y'all. There was dog gossip about Scout and Bad Scout. And like we would just chat about goings on around town and, just anything going on in our lives. That is literally how you bond a friendship.
Yep.
Your readers need to get bonded to your characters. And the way they bond to your characters is in the small hours. So they need to spend time with your characters in the small hours in order to care about whatever is going to happen to your characters. So somebody needs to make a drink, like a tea or a coffee or a cocktail, and have a little chit chat with someone else so your readers can essentially spy in and be part of that. So they will bond. So they will actually care about what happens to your characters, even when maybe your characters make some mistakes, as they will inevitably do, one hopes. And they have that adventure together. It's just like in real life. So again, I just want to encourage that, to at least think about it, get you thinking about, how will I write small hours for my characters? Later, you can decide whether you share that with your readers or not. And I do hope you will find some to share with your readers. But start practicing now. Maybe it will even bond you as the writer to your characters. Who knows?
For genre writers, if you write fantasy or urban fantasy and you don't know how to do this, I cannot recommend highly enough the Alice Hoffman books, particularly her Practical Magic series, which are filled with these. You really get to feel these characters and feel like you know them, and they are wonderful. If you are a sci-fi writer, David Gerald's Star Wolf series is very good at this as well. You don't have to read the books in order. They pretty much stand alone, but highly recommend Blood and Fire, which is my absolute favorite in that. You really do feel like you get to know the characters. It has a lot of these small moments in the middle of great and devastating things that are happening in the galaxy. There's time to take out and be able to sit with the characters. It can be done. It can be done well. It's just we are so afraid of filler episodes because online discourse is trash. And we really need to, especially as writers, get that through our heads. The people that are doing the CinemaSins style reviews of things, they don't care about stories. They're trying to be entertained for an audience that wants to hear them make fun of stories. So as long as you are telling a story that works, that all of the events in it are earned, and that it is fulfilling in some way, shape, or form, do you.
Mm-hmm.
Like some of my favorite episodes of TV, some of my favorite short stories and series are the quote unquote filler episodes, because that's where I got to know the characters and fall in love with them. So don't be afraid to take those risks. And if you hear the CinemaSins bell in the back of your head, just smile and go, whew, that felt good, and move on.
Tom, do you have any final thoughts?
If you want to play the game of writing short stories and you're just like, I have no ideas, I can't think of anything, go to whatever is your favorite streaming service, whether that's YouTube or Netflix or Amazon Prime, and go look for the latest movies and go look at their description and go find the concept. In their description somewhere there will be what is the actual concept this movie is about, and then brainstorm all your thoughts around it of that concept and write a little short story that combines that concept with those thoughts. That's it. And see what turns out. You might be surprised. It might become a seed for something more, or it might just help you practice. How would you do that situation? But anyone can tell a short story. We all have to constantly. It's how we remember the world.
Mm-hmm.
It's through short stories. That's literally how your brain encodes a memory, is it makes a short story.
Mm-hmm.
So go have fun practicing making some short stories up. It'll make, if nothing else, it will definitely help make you a better conversationalist and help you make and keep friends. People like a good storyteller.
Mm-hmm. All right. Next week. Well, we're going to talk about Cyrano de Bergerac. Cyrano de Bergerac is the 20-something version of Romeo and Juliet. You know, Romeo and Juliet is about two teenagers who definitely are falling in love against the odds, and certainly falling in love against everyone else's better judgment. And Cyrano de Bergerac is about the 20-something version of that. What if you're still not emotionally mature enough for love, but you're going to plow forward anyway? We will talk about it. It's a perennial story that keeps going, so why not?
I like Maggie's comment.
What's that?
With Megan!
Yes. Megan will be joining us. She has told us her schedule is available. So she will be joining us as we talk about the many versions of Cyrano. And I will give my hot takes as well. As well as Tom. So yes, I hope you all will come and join us for next week. Also, by the way, there are many different versions of Cyrano de Bergerac available on YouTube to watch for free, including we eventually found an English language version of the 1950 production, and Jose Ferreira's delightful to watch.
And
you got a very nice body.
Here's an interesting hot take that I'm sure will confuse anyone who hasn't watched it. The best person to really do Cyrano that they will never do, and may already be too late, but I would love to see, based on Jose, showing what a good Cyrano character actor is, would have been RuPaul.
Yes, that's Tom's take.
I can see that. Cyrano de Bergerac, where monogamy was the real villain the whole time.
I agree.
Yes.
I agree that was the real problem.
Glory wants to rewrite Cyrano as a real love triangle.
Yes. Like a proper one. As well as a polycule. Anyway, so we hope you'll join us. The week after that, we'll be talking about Mel Brooks and his entire body of work, the genius of Mel Brooks. And because, you know, how can you talk about Mel Brooks without talking about his star actor? He has said so. I recently watched another documentary about Mel Brooks where he literally talks about Gene Wilder as, you know, Fellini had his actor who really inspired him and who was able to do what he needed for his best films. And Mel Brooks said Gene Wilder was his, that Gene Wilder was the actor and the writing inspiration for his best works. He really credited Gene Wilder for that. So then we're going to talk about Gene Wilder, because Gene Wilder not only was Mel Brooks's acting and writing muse, actually, he was also a director and writer in his own right. So we shall talk about, we have love letters to both Mel Brooks and Gene Wilder. We hope you will join us for all of these episodes. And if you still haven't had enough of us, we will be meeting in the Discord, Unicorn Council Discord, chat in just a little bit. We would love to hang out with you. If you don't already have an invite, to the Discord. There is one down below in the doobly-doo under my link tree. If you click on my link tree, there's a Discord invite. If you have any problems with that invite, please let me know, and I will send you one directly. But now I shall wave you all off. Good night, everybody.
Night.